but very active on Twitter today. Lindsay.
Jonathan Karl, thank you so much. Ahead of tonight's vice presidential debate, we bring in ABC contributor Matt Dowd for more context and analysis. Thanks so much for joining us, Matt.
My pleasure, Lindsay.
All right, so let's start off with just what's at stake for tonight. At the top of these tickets, we have a 74-year-old president who's tested positive for COVID-19 and a 77-year-old challenger. How much does the vice presidential debate typically matter, and how is that different this year?
Well, vice presidential debates hardly ever move a race or have serious impact on the race, but there has been a few exceptions to that. In 2004, when I had worked for Bush and had actually debate prepped Dick Cheney, that Bush had just come off a very bad performance, like Donald Trump did, and Dick Cheney's goal was to stop the bleeding. And he asked me actually one time in the middle of a debate prep, what should I do? And I said, you need to be the tourniquet because we're losing points. We had a lead and it's evaporating because of that debate performance before the next presidential debate. So to me, this is a debate that in order for Donald Trump and Mike Pence to get back in this race where they're significantly behind, Mike Pence at least has to stop the bleeding in the polls that are going on right now.
And as you just mentioned that you prepped Vice President Dick Cheney for his debate, that was back in 2004. Tonight, what are Kamala Harris and Mike Pence's respective goals? And what would you say if you were advising them?
The polls that are going on right now. I think Mike Pence's goal, one, as I say, has to stop the bleeding and get the race back to where it was, which was a 7 or 8 point decline. The bleeding in the polls that are going on right now. 27 days left and people actually voting. As I like to tell people, November 3rd is an election day. November 3rd is the end of the election. So he has to begin to start chipping away at that lead and present the Donald Trump case in a much more forceful way of why they should get another 4 years. Not why not Joe Biden, but why they should get another 4 years. I think Kamala Harris this is her first big introduction to the American public in this big of a way in her public life. She has to perform well in that. And I think her main goal is to keep the momentum going. They don't have to build on a lead. They already have a lead. It's just to keep the momentum going because we have no idea whether we're going to have another presidential debate next week or at all. And I think that's the concern for Trump-Pence is that this may be the last opportunity they have in this kind of setting to present their argument to the American public. So I think the pressure is really on Mike Pence. But Kamala just has to keep things going and the momentum going as it has been for the last couple months.
Yeah, and you talk about that momentum. I mean, the Biden-Harris ticket has taken a commanding lead in recent polls, 16 points, according to CNN, for example. How might that impact the dynamic on tonight's debate stage?
Well, all these debates, you always have to look at it in the context of where the race is. I don't think Joe Biden has a 16-point lead. I always tell people the best thing to do is average all the polls together, and I think that gives him about a 9-point lead in this. And so this debate is consequential in that either Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to come out of this with that lead maintained, which seems pretty strong now, not only nationally but in all the key target states, or it will deteriorate. And if we are this few days left until the election is over, it's really at the point of time when the clock is beginning to tick for Donald Trump, and he has to do something in order to figure out a way to break into, not just win undecideds, Lindsay, because undecideds will not decide this race at this point. He can win all the undecideds and still lose. He has to chip away at Joe Biden's support at this point in time. And this debate tonight may be one of the last opportunities for them to do that.
Matt Dowd, as always, we thank you for your insights, and we'll see you a little bit later on tonight.
Thanks, Lindsay. Take care.
And be sure to stay tuned right here for that high-stakes debate just ahead. Matt will join us for analysis in a special edition of 2020 starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, followed by the big debate at 9 o'clock right here on ABC News Live. And now back to the COVID crisis and the dire new warnings about just how many American lives could still be lost as we head into winter. Sadly, the death toll is now above 211,000, among them more than 1,000 healthcare workers. And tonight, why one former official is now calling the government response a slaughter. Here's ABC's Steve Osunsami from the CDC in Atlanta.
The nation's top infectious disease specialist, who's gotten it right most of the time so far, has a rough winter forecast tonight.
We could have from 300,000 to 400,000 deaths. That would be just so tragic if that happens.
It's hard enough as it is on healthcare workers. A new report from Kaiser Health says that more than 1,200 of them have died from COVID-19 during this pandemic. And the racial disparities we see in the rest of America are here too. 63% of healthcare workers who died are people of color. 27-year-old Ramon Valles is a respiratory therapist in Colorado whose heart stopped beating after he got sick with COVID-19 and had to be revived.
I want people to, be aware and, don't think it's a joke. It's real. It's, people are dying.
Hospitals across the country are still reporting shortages of protective gear, and the family of Dr. Adeline Fagan wants this shared. They buried the young Houston doctor on Saturday and tell us that she had to re-wear the same protective mask over and over again.
All hospitals are facing this problem, and unfortunately, it is no different for the hospitals in Texas.
In Wisconsin, the governor is opening a field hospital at the grounds of the state fair after a record number of COVID hospitalizations. At the CDC, a letter from a former director to the current one is opening eyes wide. Dr. William Fagey, who worked under President Reagan, calls the government's response a, quote, slaughter, and says the current CDC director needs to expose the administration's mistakes, even if it costs him his job.
I kept hoping that the White House task force would see what they're doing isn't working and would change. But this is going to go down as one of the worst responses to a pandemic.
For more now, let's bring in Steve Osunsami. That is some letter. Has the White House or the CDC director responded?
The CDC director here at the CDC has not responded so far, but the White House has. They are saying that all of the decisions here are data-driven. They reject this letter as a false narrative. They reject all of the criticism. But, there's something else, some more incoming to the White House. The New England Journal of Medicine is out tonight with something we've never seen before, an unprecedented, scathing attack on the administration's response to the COVID-19 crisis, using words like reckless and dangerously incompetent. And the editors of the New England Journal of Medicine say tonight that this is not an endorsement of Joe Biden, but a rejection of the current administration.
There's some strong words there. Okay, Steve Osunsami, our thanks to you. Hurricane Delta is now churning once again in open waters as it prepares to be the latest storm to head for the Gulf Coast. The storm slammed into Mexico and the Cancun and Cozumel tourist areas, forcing some to take shelter in luxury hotels. But now it's headed our way. Rob Marciano is in New Orleans. Rob, what's the latest?
Hey, Lindsay, boy, the Yucatan and Cancun, they get hit hard by Hurricane Delta, but that land interaction did take a little bit of steam out of Delta, at least for now. There's still a good amount of Gulf water. Most of it is warm. 500 miles from the coast of Louisiana right now. We've got watches that are posted from Galveston through Louisiana and into southeastern or southwestern parts of Mississippi. We do expect Delta to strengthen back to a 2 or 3 status by early Friday. It will grow in size as well, making landfall sometime in the afternoon. All hazards in play here, including a storm surge up to 11 feet. Could see flooding rains of 6 to 12 inches. But I don't think rain's going to be as big of an issue because it is moving quite quickly. Winds will be at Category 2 or 3. That is damaging, and that can be felt here in Lafayette or potentially just down the road in Lake Charles, where they're still trying to recover from Hurricane Laura devastating them just 6 weeks ago. Lindsay?
They just keep coming one after the other. Rob, our thanks to you. They were 2 of the most wanted terror suspects in the entire world, both British and known as the Beatles. Among their victims, American journalist James Foley. But tonight they are on U.S. soil and about to face justice. Our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas has more.
Tonight, 2 of the suspected ISIS terrorists accused of playing a role in the kidnapping and sadistic execution of American journalist James Foley, now on U.S. soil to face charges. Members of the so-called Beatles ISIS cell, named because of their British accents, Alexander, Koti, and El Shafi El Sheikh, made their way to Syria from London. Today, they're charged in a conspiracy to kidnap, torture, and murder 4 Americans.
Today is a good day, but it is also a solemn one.
The other Americans killed:
Steven Sotloff was a journalist who covered the Middle East. Peter Kassig was in Syria working for a humanitarian organization. Kayla Mueller was a humanitarian aid worker and human rights activist.
Authorities say these men were beyond cruel. not only allegedly admitting to beating Foley, but also terrorizing the captives by staging mock executions in which the hostages thought they might die. Today, the FBI director speaking to families.
And while their pain may never fully subside, today, with the announcement of this indictment, we're beginning to bring them the justice they deserve.
Lindsay, the two suspects appeared in court virtually. In order to extradite them here from Iraq, the U.S. had to agree not to seek the death penalty. If convicted, they face life in prison, Lindsay.
Pierre, our thanks to you. And when we come back, the dramatic body cam and surveillance videos that show an officer struggling with a suspect over a weapon inside a police station. We have new developments also in the George Floyd case and the officer charged with taking his life. But up next, with the election less than a month away, we see how 2 states plan to protect their mail-in ballots. Stay with us.
Donald Trump during his campaign has called Mexicans rapists and criminals. He's called women slobs, pigs, dogs, disgusting. I don't like saying that in front of my wife and my mother.
If Donald Trump had said all the things that you said he said, in the way you said he said them, he still wouldn't have a fraction of the insults that Hillary Clinton leveled when she said that half of our supporters were a basket of deplorables.
Welcome to Disney Plus. Are you ready? Drop in and explore. The action, the adventure, and the originals. There's no limit to what you'll find. These are your worlds. So come on, dive deeper into the universes you love. Wherever and whenever you want them, you'll find them all here on Disney Plus.
Hello?
This is Montana Highway Patrol. You're looking for a couple of missing teenagers.
That's right. Last seen in a red Focus.
The steering wheel is getting stiff. Lock the door. We're fine.
Got ourselves a predicament.
When the night has come.
Can you think of any laws that give government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm happy to answer a more specific question, but
Male versus female.
there are medical procedures.
I'll repeat the question. Can you think of any laws that give the government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm not thinking of any right now, Senator.
The former prosecutor prosecuting the judge, now Supreme Court judge, that was Senator Kamala Harris, grilling Brett Kavanaugh at his Supreme Court confirmation hearings back in 2018. She's set to question the president's latest nominee, Amy Coney Barrett, next week if that confirmation hearing moves forward. But before that, she'll face off tonight in the debate with Vice President Mike Pence in Salt Lake City, Utah. Utah is one of a handful of states that for years has conducted its elections almost entirely by mail. Neighboring Colorado is another. So with a record number of Americans expected to join them in voting by mail this fall, ABC's Clayton Sandell talked to officials in both states and got an inside look at how Colorado has made their mail-in system work, the steps that they take to keep ballots safe and secure, and how they're responding to baseless claims by the president of mail-in voter fraud. It's tonight's Ballot Watch.
No matter how many times President Trump makes false claims about mail-in voting,
they take them, we don't like them, we don't like them. They're being sold, they're being dumped in rivers. They found ballots in a waste paper basket.
And repeats them.
See, they found ballots in a waste paper basket. They found ballots dumped in a stream.
And repeat, well, you get the idea. Election officials insist mail-in voting is secure and trustworthy.
Widespread voter fraud doesn't exist. People on the right and the left have looked for it. It just does not exist.
George Stern is a Democrat. He's in charge of running elections in Jefferson County, Colorado, a state that's had universal mail-in voting since 2013.
All the rooms are under keycard access. I don't even have access to these rooms. My elections director, Cody's going to have to let us in here.
This year, he's defending mail-in voting a lot more than usual.
What I'm worried about is that false claims of widespread voter fraud are going to cause people to throw up their hands and say, why bother participating? Why would I even vote in a process where I think this is going on? And that's voter suppression.
5 states, including next-door neighbor Utah, the site of tonight's vice presidential debate, have voted by mail for years. Vote fraud does happen, but experts say not very often. While not an exhaustive list, a database maintained by the Conservative Heritage Foundation found just under 1,300 proven instances of voter fraud since 1979 out of hundreds of millions of votes cast. Cases of people committing voter fraud in the United States are so rare, one study found that Americans are far more likely to be struck by lightning. But despite the evidence, the president's attack on mail-in voting seems to have triggered his base.
I absolutely think if you try to send in a mail-in ballot, it's either going to get dumped in a wastebasket somewhere or not even be counted.
One recent poll found 43% of Republican and Republican-leaning voters believe mail-in voting fraud is a major problem, compared to 11% of those who vote or lean Democrat. Plumber John Pavlik suggested voters dump their mail-in ballots in a toilet he put in his front yard. When police showed up, he insisted it was a joke.
And I think we just all want integrity of the next election.
Pavlik is exactly the kind of voter Stern is worried about. So as the election nears, he's taking us behind the scenes, eager to show off just how secure mail-in voting is in Colorado.
So we call this the Hubble. This is our camera view of everything.
For starters, each of the county's 35 ballot drop boxes is on camera 24/7.
They're on surveillance, whether they're coming at 3 in the morning or 6 p.m. We use this both to make sure that nothing's going wrong and nothing bad is happening, but also it helps us manage crowds. So these rooms are so secure that cleaning crews are not allowed in here. And so we have our own vacuum cleaner because we have to clean it. We have to take our trash cans out into the hallway.
As every ballot arrives, each signature is checked by machines and a bipartisan team of judges trained by FBI handwriting experts. Less than 1% of signatures are ever rejected.
Every time you've ever voted, filled out a voter registration form, visit the DMV, and that bipartisan team can usually say, well, actually, we can tell that that is the right signature and accepts it.
The ballots are then counted by machines that Stern says cannot be hacked.
We take transparency very literally in this room. That is our system connection right there. You can see the fiber optic cables running up the top of it. You can see the connections, and that's all an internal system so that the results can move throughout the system, but that we're not actually connected to the internet.
This week, Jefferson County invited election judges from both parties to participate in what they call a logic and accuracy test. If a ballot has a problem, like this one, the team works to make sure the vote is counted.
So as you can see, this one has a red border around it. The system would want to count this as an overvote. So in this case, we would unselect the vote for Diana and continue to have a vote for Shane.
We are counting ballots for 2 weeks before Election Day. We don't know the results until 7 p.m. when we click the tabulate button and then make those results available.
In the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, several states, including Nevada, are quickly ramping up mail-in voting as a socially distanced alternative. Republican Wayne Williams, who served as Colorado's Secretary of State, worries some states may not be ready with systems that can take years to perfect.
Some of those states who are wanting to move to this system may not have an accurate signature database.
And how much can that affect the outcome?
It can affect it tremendously. So if you don't count the right ballots, you can shift an election by a point or two. So I hear rhetoric from both sides saying they're always safe or they're always fraudulent. Neither of those is correct. If you do it right, you can have a safe system.
The Trump campaign sued Nevada's Republican Secretary of State to stop ballots from being mailed to all active voters, but lost.
We don't have a prevalent issue of voter fraud in this state. We're not scared of Mr. Trump. We're not intimidated by him, and we will do all that we can again to exercise this franchise and to protect the exercise of this franchise.
There are sporadic cases of ballot trouble around the country. In New Jersey, a mail carrier was arrested today on charges he threw mail into dumpsters, including nearly 100 ballots. LA County is apologizing after 2,000 ballots were misprinted without the presidential race. And last week, the president tweeted about 100,000 misprinted ballots sent to voters in Brooklyn. Playing up incidents that officials insist are relatively minor or totally bogus is part of a strategy, political experts say, to enact tougher voting restrictions.
That tends to reduce turnout for
for people in cities. It tends to reduce turnout for poorer people, for people of color. Today, that tends to mean Democrats more than Republicans. He is concerned about possibly losing this election. And he's trying to raise concerns that he will only lose if it's a fraudulent election.
Utah has also used mail-in voting for the last 7 years, a heavily Republican state using a system now under attack by a Republican president.
Well, I think the president's probably referring to states that aren't Utah.
The state's GOP chair hopes, despite rhetoric from the president, cooler heads prevail on election night.
The best course of action is not to ever assume a conspiracy. Just be patient. Our clerks in every county work incredibly hard, and they have processes in place, and we just need to wait and let the process work itself out.
Election officials on both sides of the aisle hope that when voters cast a mail-in ballot, it's also a vote for keeping the faith and trust in the system.
I would not pretend to speak for the president or to psychoanalyze why he's doing what he's doing. I will say only that we have had 7 years of experience of universal vote by mail in Colorado. We have broad bipartisan support for it, and we can say unequivocally that it is extremely accessible and extremely secure.
Clayton Sandell, ABC News, Golden, Colorado.
Our thanks to Clayton for that. And still ahead here on Primer, Bob Woodruff in this week's Vaccine Watch speaks with officials who work for the company behind that antibody drug cocktail given to President Trump. How is the testing going, and could it be made available to the general public? It's the conspiracy theory followed by some Republicans running for office, but now Facebook is banning it. And with the president's decision to stop negotiations on a new stimulus bill, we take a look at just how fragile the economy is right now. But first, our tweet of the day, Macaulay Culkin reminiscing about his role in Home Alone.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
Where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up.
On your carts. Get set. Let's go.
Get ready.
The team with the highest card total could be leaving with $100,000.
To shop.
Bam, bam, bam.
Till you drop.
Oh, mommy down.
Leslie Jones hosts Supermarket Sweep. Premieres Sunday, October 18th on ABC.
The waters of the Outer Banks are unforgiving and full of riches for the fishermen who dare. The best of the Northern Fleet are heading south, but the locals know where the giants lie. And if you thought the waters were unforgiving, wait until the battle begins. Wicked Tuna Outer Banks. New episodes Sundays at 9 on National Geographic.
Welcome back, everybody. As we head into tonight's vice presidential debate, many voters are certainly thinking about their jobs and the faltering U.S. economy. So tonight, we take stock of the economic crisis the next administration, whether it's Biden, Harris, or Trump, Pence, will have to face by the numbers. 12.6 million Americans are now out of work, and the U.S. unemployment rate is 7.9%. Now, that's high, but it's down significantly from its April peak of nearly 15%. 11.4 million U.S. jobs have been added since March, but even though lockdowns were mostly lifted, 3.8 million Americans permanently lost their jobs this year. And entire industries have just been crushed, like the airlines, which are laying off more than 30,000 workers, and restaurants. 40% are expected to close within 6 months if they don't receive aid, according to one survey. With stimulus talks stalling, American households and businesses have now gone 2 months without enhanced unemployment checks, loans, and other pandemic relief from the federal government. And at the moment, there's no telling when more help will come. Still so much to get to here on Prime tonight. The new technology aiming to help schools stay open by detecting COVID early and ideally before it spreads in a classroom. And the company putting a stop to selling electronic shock collars on dogs. We'll explain why. But first, here's a look at some of the trending stories on abcnews.com.
Welcome to Disney Plus. Are you ready? Drop in and explore. The action, the adventure, and the originals. There's no limit to what you'll find. These are your worlds. So come on, dive deeper into the universes you love. Wherever and whenever you want them, you'll find them all here on Disney Plus.
I'm very thankful that these men are fine.
Tuesday, October 13th, we respect your wishes. The Bachelorette is back.
This is the perfect place to fall in love.
But respect the rumors.
Do not ever talk to me like that.
It's true.
What?
This is the most shocking season ever.
Makes me sick.
That's crazy. Do declare.
Congratulations, you've just blown up The Bachelorette.
The Bachelorette season premiere Tuesday, October 13th on ABC.
It's being called the most consequential election of a lifetime. The most important vote. And with so much on the line, it demands the most straightforward, newsmaking, real answers. The most informed voices from all sides. The countdown is on to the vote. What will our future look like? ABC's This Week with George. It all plays out right here every Sunday.
The most consequential week yet of this hyper-political year.
Right as you get closer to casting your vote every Sunday on ABC.
Amid a COVID-19 outbreak at the White House, a likely still infectious President Trump returning to the Oval Office.
I want everybody to be given the same treatment as your president. I think this was a blessing from God that I caught it. This was a blessing in disguise.
The chief of staff said they are taking precautions.
Not only from a PPE standpoint, but from a ventilation standpoint in the Oval, where we can actually work to that end as well.
CDC guidelines say President Trump should be isolating for at least 10 days from his first symptoms and at least 24 hours after his fever is gone.
I wouldn't go anywhere near the White House. It's one of the most dangerous places in the country.
His physician says the president has been symptom-free and has detectable levels of antibodies. But experts say those antibodies could be the body's natural reaction from trying to fight off the virus, or may be linked to the large dose of experimental antibody medication he received while in the hospital. Also today, members of the White House staff were spotted having lunch outside in close proximity to one another.
President Trump tweeted yesterday that he wanted Republicans to call off negotiations for a stimulus bill until after the election. But hours later, he reversed course, signaling he would sign measures that would give direct payments to Americans, help the struggling airline industry, and boost small businesses. All things that were on the table during talks between Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
There's about 10 things that we agree on, and if the Speaker is willing to look at those things on a piece-by-piece basis, then we're willing to look at it.
But Democrats have insisted on more federal funding for state and local governments and have resisted a piecemeal approach.
He said he'd send out those checks if we just sent him that bill, because all he has ever wanted in the negotiation was to send out a check with his name printed on it.
Derek Chauvin is out of jail after posting $1 million bail.
Chauvin is the officer shown on video pinning his knee to George Floyd's neck.
Chauvin is charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter in the case. He is due back in court in March. The three other officers implicated in Floyd's death previously posted bail.
Facebook is taking down pages and accounts that support QAnon, described as a far-right group based on groundless conspiracy theories.
The FBI has come out and said they believe this could be a potential domestic terror threat. This move by Facebook is intended to take those pages down, to remove that content from the platform so that people are no longer seeing it and spreading it. The president has said that while he doesn't know much about the movement, he has appreciated the fact that his understanding is that they support him. There is to this policy one thing for users: they will not be banning individuals from posting about QAnon.
Petco says it has stopped selling electronic shock collars used to train dogs. The pet supply chain says shock collars have been shown to increase fear, anxiety, and stress in dogs. Petco says it wants to promote positive reinforcement training instead, and it's calling on its competitors to do the same.
Shock collars accounted for roughly $10 million of Petco sales in 2019. The retailer has also started a petition to have the collars regulated and used only by certified training professionals.
Welcome back. Authorities in L.A. released dramatic body cam video showing an officer and a suspect struggle over a gun. The altercation happened inside a police station. Officials also released clear surveillance of the attack, the suspect beating the officer in the head with his own gun before a shootout with another officer. The suspect was then chased down the street before he was tackled and now faces attempted murder charges. And now we turn to a disturbing new report by the New York Times about the Trump administration's widely condemned family separation policy at the southern border. Citing an 86-page draft investigation report, the newspaper claims that in 2018, then Attorney General Jeff Sessions told his prosecutors, quote, "We need to take away children." That policy, according to the report, included ripping breastfeeding infants from their mothers. Sessions announced the so-called zero tolerance policy in the spring of 2018.
I have put in place a zero tolerance policy for illegal entry on our southwest border. If you cross the border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you. And that child may be separated from you as required by law.
Ultimately, more than 5,000 families were separated, many for months. And even though the policy officially ended in June of 2018, the ACLU says that they still have not been able to locate or reunite every family that may have been impacted. The civil rights organization called the policy child abuse and one of the cruelest immigration practices in the history of our country. With President Trump at the White House now recovering from COVID-19, some promising news from the White House physician's memo today, stating that the president's latest physical exam and vital signs are in the normal range. Certainly a good sign for a patient who needed oxygen just a few days ago. And some are pointing to the experimental monoclonal antibody treatment that he received while at Walter Reed as a possible reason for his improvement. And it's something that the president is now touting as a potential cure. So this week, our Bob Woodruff got a behind-the-scenes look at that antibody treatment currently in clinical trials that some hope could serve as a bridge to a vaccine in our latest edition of Vaccine Watch.
After the president's flight from the White House to Walter Reed, he received special permission to try an experimental drug.
The president given the best health care available in the country and 2 experimental treatments.
It includes a promising potential treatment known as monoclonal antibodies. But because the safety trials are still not completed in the U.S., very few other patients have been granted their use. For President Trump, it may have helped.
If you're asking me my opinion, I think it made a difference. I think that the monoclonal antibody made a difference, and it is in clinical trial now to try and prove definitively if it works.
But in a new video released tonight, the president is going much further, touting the treatment as a cure.
They gave me Regeneron, and it was like unbelievable.
The president received antibodies made by the biotech company Regeneron, which started its trials here at the Holy Name Hospital in New Jersey.
These antibodies are directed against the virus, and they've been shown to reduce the amount of virus and reduce the symptoms. Among the 29 patients that we have used in the 3 arms of this study, they have all gotten better.
Here in their pharmacy, they showed us what they are almost certain was the president's treatment cocktail.
If you can explain to me, what exactly did he get?
Sure. So this is the antibody cocktail from Regeneron. So the way that this is prepared is it comes as an IV solution.
But it wasn't just antibodies. Trump also got a cocktail of drugs that included steroids and antiviral medication.
The remdesivir is an IV piggyback, and then the dexamethasone, it can be either an IV push or a pill.
The president was not the first to receive Regeneron's antibody treatment, although, unlike the president, volunteers for the trial don't know whether they received the placebo or the real thing.
So you had no smell and no taste?
Yes, that's
correct. And then
correct.
after this injection that you got, just a couple of days that came back?
Yes, correct.
One of the other companies producing monoclonal antibodies is Eli Lilly. Weeks ago, we witnessed their treatment's potential to stop an outbreak in its tracks, many calling antibodies like theirs a bridge to a vaccine.
We are giving patients the antibody which the vaccine is intended to make your body produce.
One of those studies looking at prevention of even the spread of COVID in a nursing home.
What do you want to get? Do you want a placebo or do you want like the real thing?
Oh, I want the real thing.
But last week highlighted the possible impact of these antibodies as a way to treat people who are already infected. That's exactly what doctors were hoping for when the president took the treatment.
Clearly, he appears improved. I am inclined to attribute it to the 3 different therapies that he received.
And at the UC Health Center in Denver, this family also volunteered for Regeneron's experimental treatment.
I was the bringer of COVID to the family. The symptoms were pretty mild. I had a fever for a couple days.
My daughter and I were watching TV one night and we both were sniffling, and I looked at her and I said, "Are you sniffling?" And she said, "Yeah, I think you are too." And then we're just like, oh man. And then the next morning we both woke up with no taste or smell.
After the infusion, Graham says she got over her symptoms notably faster than her son.
I like to think that I got the placebo and she got Regeneron because, no way she was able to recover from COVID faster than I was.
Yeah, no, it's very possible I got the real thing. Because it's possible that I had my smell back during like a couple hours afterwards, just for a moment or two.
Since the president's use of monoclonal antibodies, trial facilities tell us volunteer applications have risen dramatically. Their hope is that this will lead to faster government approval.
I think that all of this attention to this therapy may speed up the approval, and the mechanism by which it would do so is that people will be even more inclined to seek out enrollment in this trial.
Today, Eli Lilly announced it is seeking emergency use authorization from the FDA. And since monoclonal antibodies have gotten all this presidential attention, stocks for both Eli Lilly and Regeneron have gone up. I'm Bob Woodruff, tracking the race for a vaccine.
Bit of a boost to the market based on that good news. Our thanks to Bob for that. The struggle to keep schools and businesses open while this pandemic rages on is likely to come up in the vice presidential debate tonight. But now there's a new technology that's about to be rolled out in classrooms claiming to help prevent the spread of COVID. Our Janae Norman has this story.
An exclusive look at a new device said to be able to track coughs, sneezes, and fever in the classroom. Teaming up with engineers and epidemiologists, Clorox, the company famous for bleach and wipes, taking us along for its first test run in a classroom.
How can it pinpoint coughs and sneezes?
There is a microphone in the device, and it is trained to look at the unique frequencies that are coughs and sneezes. The temperature is monitored with a thermal sensor.
At this empty elementary school in New Jersey, researchers showed us how they say this illness symptom tracker works. To replicate real coughs and sneezes, researchers played audio files, and staff used heated blankets and hand warmers to imitate fevers, all tracked on this dashboard accessible by computer.
So it says 109 coughs and sneezes detected, 3 high temperature readings.
This device, time and time again, is able to detect coughs and sneezes in the classroom.
All along, this is a race between us and the virus, and any tool that we can use to give us a head start can really help.
With the help of epidemiologists, Clorox says they determined the point at which teachers should take notice of possible illness in the classroom, depending on size and other factors. For example, if a class of 24 students reaches 66 total coughs and sneezes in a 7-hour period, an alert email is sent to administrators. But experts caution that just tracking symptoms won't catch all cases of COVID-19.
One of the great challenges and mysteries of COVID is that people can be asymptomatic and still have COVID. That means no cough, no sneeze, no runny nose, no fever.
And while Clorox is looking for 100 schools across the country to participate in a trial run of this device, other schools are turning to different technology. One Houston area school district dispatching specialized cameras that the district says can take the temperature of up to 30 people at a time, capturing readings while students walk into school or down hallways. And Motorola recently introduced an AI program it says can help schools by calculating the distance between people and monitoring building capacity. The software also aiming to track mask compliance. Florida Atlantic University confirming to ABC they're exploring using this technology in high-traffic areas on campus like the library.
Our thanks to Janae. And when we come back, preventing mask fights before they even start, we ask an expert about pandemic etiquette, about the manners and customs to staying safe and peacefully coexisting.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's most watched program across all of television.
I'm very thankful that these men are fine.
Tuesday, October 13th, we respect your wishes. The Bachelorette is back.
This is the perfect place to fall in love.
But respect the rumors.
Do not ever talk to me like that.
It's true. What? This is the most shocking season ever.
That makes me sick.
That's crazy. Do declare.
Congratulations, you've just blown up The Bachelorette.
The Bachelorette season premiere Tuesday, October 13th on ABC.
Hello? This is Montana Highway Patrol. You're looking for a couple of missing teenagers. That's right. Last seen in a red Focus.
The steering wheel is getting stiff. Lock the door.
We're fine.
Got ourselves a predicament.
When the night has come.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
Where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up.
Cross my office off the list. What if we picked for each other?
Please stop.
I can see clearly now. The rain is gone.
Writer of that wonderful chart-topping hit, I Can See Clearly Now. His signature song would go on to be covered by artists like Ray Charles, Jimmy Cliff, and Donny Osmond. Nash was also influential in the early development of reggae music, signing Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and Bunny Wailer to one of their first record deals. Nash passed away from natural causes at the age of 80 in his hometown of Houston. And that bright, shiny message from Nash's biggest song is certainly something that we're all hoping for after the year that we are having. But the reality, as health experts warn, is that we are far from seeing the rain gone from this pandemic. And despite the president's position, wearing masks and keeping distance is still the best way to stop the virus from spreading. So what do you do in situations where you're not quite on the same page as those that you're with? Our Romina Puga asks an etiquette expert.
We've seen them go viral throughout the pandemic.
We're on the other side of the fence. We don't believe in this stuff. Hey.
People on edge over COVID safety measures.
That man harassed me for not wearing a mask. I have a breathing problem.
I don't think we should be required to wear one because, it's a free country.
To protect people, I do feel it should be.
Businesses in many regions are struggling to maintain a peaceful and safe shopping experience for their customers, their staff often taking on the added role of security. At Good On Ya, a local coffee shop in San Diego County, owner Chris Buchanan posted a video to help her employees deal with defiant customers who refuse to wear a mask.
I think every business has a responsibility to do the right thing.
Buchanan has spent roughly $10,000 on PPE and umbrellas to move the restaurant outside.
Do you know how much money we're spending and what we're doing to try to even stay alive? We can't enforce. We don't have the skills. We're not trained. We don't have the money to go through the training. And I don't want to put my people in that situation.
So what's the right response when dealing with someone who isn't following guidelines? Etiquette trainer Elaine Swan, founder of the Swan School of Protocol, has been helping people navigate these tricky new social dilemmas.
People are wondering how to deal with these individuals without it turning into a viral video moment.
Take off your mask. We're done. We're done.
Elaine advises to resist the urge to intervene.
If you're in a line and there's a group of people near you that are maybe laughing and talking and they're not wearing their mask, my recommendation is to mind your business and leave those people alone. But do what you can to protect yourself. Typically, individuals who get up in the morning, go out amongst people, they know what the news is, they hear what's asked of them. If they choose not to do so, there's not much that you're going to be able to say in that particular moment to get those folks to change their mind.
But the real awkwardness happens when you're dealing with friends and family.
As we start to gather with family and friends, most especially as we get upon the holiday season, I think it's important for us to recognize that now is the time for us to feel empowered and assured that it's perfectly fine for us to ask those hard questions or those questions that might make other people feel a little bit uneasy. Will you be social distancing? Will you be using masks? What do you expect of me?
Elaine says you want to make sure your relationships make it to the other side of the pandemic.
So make sure you ask and don't accuse.
Joanne Rubin in Long Beach, California, hosted a happy hour with a few close friends, choosing to send out COVID guidelines beforehand.
When I invite folks over, I want to make sure that they feel safe, and we want to be safe as well. We don't want people coming through the house, so we give instructions to come up to the side of the house. And then the other thing is that we want to make sure that people are far enough apart. I believe that people are more comfortable if they know what the expectation is and if it's clearly defined, and then people know what to expect, and we ourselves as hosts feel comfortable as well.
Etiquette experts say communication is key, but warn to resist the urge and try and police our friends. Instead, we should focus on controlling our own behaviors over the behaviors of others. Romina Puga, ABC News, Los Angeles.
Thanks to Romina for helping us with those tips to make sure that our relationships outlast this pandemic. And before we go tonight, our image of the day. Two candidates who will take their positions and be separated by the plexiglass you see there on the stage. The coronavirus is the enduring threat of 2020, and it's impacting the vice presidential debate tonight between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris, too. And that is our show for this hour. About to switch sets and join George Stephanopoulos and David Muir, our entire powerhouse political team for the vice presidential debate. Stay tuned right here to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. See you in a little bit.
It was a fairy tale love story.
He was the closest to Prince Charming.
That George Clooney feel, sexy.
She was swept off her feet.
He would record these video love messages to me.
I love you very much.
Then he proposed, planning an A-list wedding. And
we're getting married by the Pope. Oh. No, I'm not joking. We're getting married by the Pope.
But it's complicated.
What if this is all a lie?
I'm Whoopi Goldberg, and this is The Con. Premieres Wednesday on ABC.
It's being called the most consequential election of a lifetime, the most important vote, and with so much on the line, it demands the most straightforward, newsmaking, real answers, the most informed voices from all sides. The countdown is on to the vote. What will our future look like? ABC's This Week with George. It all plays out right here every Sunday.
The most consequential week yet of this hyper-political year.
Right as you get closer to casting your vote every Sunday on ABC.
This is a 2020 special. Just last week.
I'm not going to answer the question.
Why would you answer that question?
The question is,
Then just days later,
President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump testing positive for the coronavirus. Former Vice President Joseph Biden, of course, was at the debate with the president on Tuesday night, has tested negative.
An October surprise in a year of chaos. Tonight, the running mates step into the spotlight. Vice President Mike Pence.
The choice is clear. We need 4 more years of President Donald Trump.
Senator Kamala Harris.
There's something happening all across our country. It's not about Joe or me. It's about you.
The vice presidential debate. Live from the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. and ABC News election headquarters. Now reporting, Chief Anchor George Stephanopoulos.
Good evening and welcome to our special coverage of the race for the White House, tonight's first and only vice presidential debate. Now, how many of you feel like it's been about a year since last week's debate? That is the story of 2020, weeks packed with crises, political earthquakes, and this last one tops them all. The coronavirus that has claimed more than 210,000 Americans' lives has zeroed in on the White House, infecting almost 36, including the president himself. And as he faced this health crisis, Trump's political standing perilous, with polls showing Joe Biden now opening a double-digit lead. That is the scene at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, where 1 hour from now, Vice President Mike Pence, the epitome of a loyal number 2 these last 4 years, will face Senator Kamala Harris, a former prosecutor, now the first woman of color ever nominated on a national ticket. I'm here with World News anchor David Muir, ABC News live anchor Lindsay Davis. And David, you know, these vice presidential debates usually something of a sideshow, not this year.
No question about it. And it's just extraordinary, as you pointed out at the top here, George, what's played out since the three of us were sitting here just a little more than a week ago. We have a major outbreak in Washington, D.C. Ground zero is the White House, a president, a first lady, and the latest number from our White House team, at least 34 people, 34 connected to this president and to the White House testing positive for COVID. As you point out, the VP debate takes on added significance. Both will make the case that they're ready to step in at a moment's notice to become president, to become commander-in-chief. But Mike Pence faces an additional hurdle tonight, and it's a serious one. He's the head of the coronavirus task force, and he will have to make the case tonight that the American people are supposed to be able to look to this White House, look to Vice President Mike Pence to keep them safe, knowing full well that the president is positive, 34 people around him are positive, and we also know the president will be watching tonight. He knows where the polling is right now, and he's expecting a command performance from Mike Pence to help with these numbers.
And as we look at that stage, Lindsay Davis, you see it's retrofitted now. It's got those plexiglass shields that were not there last week. And that was a source of some real tension between the campaigns.
That's right. They now do have those two plexiglass dividers there, despite that little bit of a dust up from Pence's campaign yesterday when they were saying, look, kind of mocking Senator Harris, saying if she wants to surround herself in a plexiglass fortress, then have at it. Essentially saying that they felt that medically it wasn't necessary for the vice president, primarily because they felt that they're taking all of these other safety precautions. We know that they're going to be 12 feet 3 inches apart. Everybody in the debate hall has to wear a mask. Both of the candidates have been tested daily leading up to this moment. But I think if we look at that partition, it's really the ultimate metaphor as far as the divide between these two campaigns, especially when we're talking about coronavirus. You have the Trump administration that essentially from the beginning has said, hey, nothing to see here. We're rounding the corner, has been the quote, versus the Biden campaign that said, no, we're going to follow the science, take the precautions, keep people safe. And by the way, to the Trump administration, you guys have been mishandling this pandemic from the beginning. And I think if we can take this analogy of this plexiglass divider, it extends beyond coronavirus. When you're talking about these two candidates, there's a lot of divide, a lot of daylight between the two of them when it comes to abortion, when it comes to immigration, policing, the protests, even just the fundamental status of America as it stands at this particular moment. You know, you've had Mike Pence, who has said again and again that this election is about if America remains America, versus Kamala Harris, who's saying no, essentially status quo in this country needs to be changed. In fact, it needs to be overhauled.
She is saying it is time for a change. Let's go to the hall right now. Mary Bruce is there along with Rachel Scott. And Mary, let me begin with you. As I said, Senator Kamala Harris, a former prosecutor. We know she's going to be taking the case to Mike Pence as head of the coronavirus task force.
George, she is known for those fierce cross-examinations, those feisty exchanges at congressional hearings, and tonight she is going to try and argue the case that Mike Pence and the Trump administration have failed the American people in responding to this pandemic. She is going to try and put Pence, the head of the coronavirus task force, on defense. Now, I'm told she's not going to try and eviscerate Pence, but instead she's going to try and make her case directly to the American people. She has been intensely preparing, going over all of Pence's previous debates. She herself has been a bit of an uneven debater in the past. And of course, tonight, she's also going to be making history, becoming the first black woman, the first Indian American ever to sit on a debate stage for vice president. She knows that this is a huge moment for women, for especially women of color and young girls in this country. And George, she is well aware of the unfortunate reality that American politics still puts unique and often unfair expectations on women. Her team says she is aware of that, and she is going to be making history again here tonight.
Okay, Mary, thanks very much. Let's bring in Rachel Scott. Rachel, Mike Pence had a pretty solid debate against Tim Kaine 4 years ago. Very different job this time, having to defend the record. But in those 4 years, with the exception of what happened 4 years ago today, that Access Hollywood tape where he disappeared for about 24 hours, he has defended the president at every turn.
George, he is a fierce defender of President Trump, so much so that behind-the-scenes campaign aides referred to him as on-message Mike. And so we will see that reflected again here tonight. But I am told from Pence aides that he is expected to paint Senator Kamala Harris as to the left of Joe Biden and paint that as the future of the Democratic Party. Of course, so much of the focus will be on the president's handling of the coronavirus. As the head of the coronavirus task force, Pence will have to defend that record there as well. I'm told that he will focus largely on recovery, talking about job creation and the economy bouncing back. But the reality, George, is 26 million Americans are still out of work on unemployment, George.
Okay, Rachel, thanks very much. President Trump not entirely out of the spotlight today. Actually recorded a video in the Rose Garden earlier today reflecting on his bout with COVID.
I think this was a blessing from God that I caught it. This was a blessing in disguise. I caught it. I heard about this drug. I said, let me take it. It was my suggestion. I said, let me take it. And it was incredible the way it worked. Incredible. And I think if I didn't catch it, we'd be looking at that like a number of other drugs. But it really did a fantastic job.
Let's bring in our Dr. Jen Ashton for more on this. I was struck by the president saying it was his suggestion to take the Regeneron. We also got a statement from the president's doctors today. They say he continues to improve and actually they say has developed antibodies.
Yeah, George, let's talk about that Regeneron medication. And obviously, it was a great decision at this point therapeutically to administer that to the patient. According to infectious disease specialists that we spoke with, the presence of antibodies for the president may not be accurate depending on what particular test was used. Regeneron gave a statement to ABC News this afternoon saying it is likely that the test was actually picking up the Regeneron antibodies. It's hard to tell whether that would be a natural response detected by the test or one that is provided by one of the treatment modalities he got. But George, big news today in the medical world was the editorial from the New England Journal of Medicine, those editors issuing one of their most powerful editorials saying, quote, truth is neither liberal nor conservative, and stating that our current leaders have undercut the trust in science and government. Strong words from the New England Journal.
Boy, they sure were. No question about that, Jen. Thanks very much. This being our chief White House correspondent, John Karl. So, John, the president obviously itching to get out there in public again. I know there's been some talk about an Oval Office address by the president. Of course, he's been active on Twitter.
He's been unbelievably active on Twitter. Also, I am told he's got a schedule set for the next 4 days. There's just announced an interview that he's going to do on one of the Fox channels. So he's eager to get out there. I'm told that he wants to get out there. He wants to actually travel. He wants to do another rally. All of this talk coming. He was actually in the Oval Office today, something that raised alarm bells among many, potentially putting more people at risk, although I'm told that the number of people with access to him was very small. And George, we're getting a sense of just how widespread this hot zone is at the White House. ABC News has obtained a memo, security memo that was prepared that said actually the number is 34 at the White House or tied to the White House that have tested positive for coronavirus. That's even higher than what we had counted, and it means that they have not given us all of the names.
Okay, let's go to your colleague Cecilia Vega, also from the White House. And Cecilia, it was sort of striking yesterday to see those pictures of workers in hazmat suits going through the White House press room to try to sanitize the White House press room. And behind the scenes, it appears that a lot of aides something shell-shocked, basically.
Yeah, what's been described to us, George, as full-blown freak-out mode. But look, there are two camps, because in addition to that image you just showed, there's another one that we just saw today right there in the White House grounds. A number of staffers on the grounds of the White House eating lunch, packed together, very few people wearing masks. So for some, it's very much business as usual. But for others, people are scared. People are scared that they're going to be the next one to get this. We've heard from folks who say that they felt like they were shamed if they wore a mask to the White House. We've been talking about this for a long time. We very rarely saw folks folks wearing masks. We very rarely saw any social distancing happening. People are now hoping to get tested. They fear that they're going to be the next one to get this. Many are now working from home, but you saw the president in that striking image this week when he came home from Walter Reed, entering into the White House residence, not wearing a mask. There's real concern for the people who work inside that residence every single day, the butlers and the housekeepers, George, whether they're staying safe through this. The White House says that they're being given PPE and tested regularly, but you got to wonder if the president is willing to flaunt the rules like he has been so far, how safe those folks really are.
They are part of that institution. Thank you, Cecilia. Let's bring in Martha Raddatz, our Chief Global Affairs anchor. Martha, it's not just the White House. The military has been hit as well. All but one of the Joint Chiefs now in quarantine. And you've got national security professionals like former DNI head James Clapper warning that it's the perfect time for our adversaries to try and confuse and distract us.
It certainly is, George. And while it's very prudent that the Joint Chiefs are quarantining themselves, it doesn't look good to the adversaries. And certainly this is a moment where they might try to take advantage. We're not talking about missile strikes or anything like that, but they will certainly look at Donald Trump. They will look at his health. They will look at all of these military generals and admirals. And by the way, George, there was just one, the commandant of the Marine Corps, who was not quarantined because he went out of town, but the assistant commandant has now tested positive. He was in a meeting on Friday with the other Joint Chiefs in what's called the tank in the Pentagon. That's where the assistant commandant of the Coast Guard later tested positive. That's why they're quarantining. So this is something they are really watching. Many of them were at a meeting at the White House the Sunday following the Rose Garden event. But the assistant commandant was not. So I think they are looking more generally at that meeting at the Pentagon, but they don't know how the Coast Guard admiral got that at the time.
And there was that event with Gold Star families as well. Okay, Martha, let's bring in Pierre Thomas, our Chief Justice correspondent. We already know that even before this crisis, Russia and to some extent China were trying to interfere in the elections. But we saw an extraordinary video yesterday from the FBI director and other intelligence officials trying to reassure the public.
That's right, George. Even as President Trump has repeatedly suggested the upcoming election might be rigged, FBI Director Chris Wray and other top intelligence officials have released that video you talked about, urging calm and confidence as Americans go to the polls. Their collective message: yes, foreign governments like Russia and Iran are trying to spread disinformation and hack politicians, but the U.S. government is on top of it and pushing back. And, George, they're saying it would be extremely difficult to have any wide-scale interference in the upcoming election. But they emphasize, with so many Americans voting by mail because of coronavirus, that it may take longer to know who won. They say that's okay. Have patience. The votes will be tallied and they will count. And, George, a starkly different tone from what we're hearing from the president.
No question about that. Okay, Pierre, thanks very much. The debate 45 minutes away. We're going to come back with a deeper dive looking at the polls, Nate Silver's forecast, and our roundtable.
Welcome to Disney Plus. Are you ready? Drop in and explore. The action, the adventure, and the originals. There's no limit to what you'll find. These are your worlds. So come on, dive deeper into the universes you love. Wherever and whenever you want them, you'll find them all here on Disney Plus.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
Where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up.
I'm very thankful that these men are fine.
Tuesday, October 13th, we respect your wishes. The Bachelorette is back.
This is the perfect place to fall in love.
But respect the rumors.
Do not ever talk to me like that.
It's true.
What?
This is the most shocking season ever.
That makes me sick.
That's crazy. Do declare.
Congratulations, you've just blown up The Bachelorette.
The Bachelorette season premiere Tuesday, October 13th on ABC.
It's being called the most consequential election of a lifetime, the most important vote. And with so much on the line, it demands the most straightforward, newsmaking, real answers, the most informed voices from all sides. The countdown is on to the vote. What will our future look like? ABC's This Week with George. It all plays out right here every Sunday.
The most consequential week yet of this hyper-political year.
Right as you get closer to casting your vote every Sunday on ABC.
The waters of the Outer Banks are unforgiving and full of riches for the fishermen who dare. The best of the Northern Fleet are heading south, but the locals know where the giants lie. And if you thought the waters were unforgiving, wait until the battle begins.
Wicked Tuna Outer Banks. New episodes Sundays at 9 on National Geographic.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
Okay, if you're starring in the hit show being called Fantastic and Glorious, what are you doing tomorrow morning? Well, if you're Jason Schwartzman and Jack Houston, you're bringing a little Fargo with you to America's #1 morning show. ABC's Good Morning America tomorrow.
The most important thing to me is...
What are you going to do about coronavirus?
Coronavirus.
Its impact on the economy.
We have 10 million Americans, our friends, our family that are out of work.
The biggest issue right now is the lockdown.
We need raw truth.
Honesty. Honesty.
So that they can gain the trust of the American public.
That's what some voters want to hear tonight in this vice presidential debate, now about 40 minutes away. Let's take a deeper dive now at the polls, those battleground states that the campaign's been focusing on over the course of this campaign. 6 key states. Tom Yamas is here. Tom, national polls now show an average of almost 10-point lead for Joe Biden. What's happening in those key states?
That's right. So, George, as you mentioned at the top of this broadcast, a lot of news and a lot of polls since the last debate. So what's changed? First, these are the 6 battleground states we're tracking very closely. In this column, this was the president's margin of victory 4 years ago. In this column is the current polling average from our friends at 538. So what's changed since the last debate? In Michigan and Wisconsin, not much. Joe Biden's still leading according to these polls. In Pennsylvania, though, North Carolina and Arizona, Joe Biden has increased his lead by 1 percentage point. You may be at home saying 1 percentage point, who cares? That's incredibly important. When you look at states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, the president won by less than a percentage point. So what happened in Florida? Joe Biden, since the last debate, has increased his lead by 2 percentage points. In fact, a poll just out today shows independents breaking for Joe Biden by 20 points. That's pretty big news if that sticks for the election. Of course, the Trump campaign says when you look at the issue of the economy, he still beats Joe Biden. But, George, when it comes to COVID-19, more voters trust Joe Biden.
Tom, you've also been looking at the early vote. It is record-shattering.
It is record-shattering. So, look, this is the map from 4 years ago. All these gray states, only 6 of them, that's the only place where early voting is not happening. So we're talking about 44 states that are currently voting right now. All the battlegrounds and those big 6 battlegrounds we were talking about. What does this mean? Well, according to Michael McDonald from the U.S. Elections Project, 5.5 million Americans have voted in person and by mail. Let's put that in perspective. Around this time last year, about 75,000 people voted. This is a 4,000% increase. We've never seen anything like this. This is completely unprecedented. Let me show you another stat real quick. When we go to Wisconsin right now, for instance, in Wisconsin right now, one of the key battleground states, 20% of the vote is in when you compare the total vote to 4 years ago, and we still have 4 weeks to go. So the big question, who is this helping, Joe Biden or President Trump? Election experts we spoke to point to one fact right now that they're following. In the states that have party registration data, Democrats are outpacing Republicans in requesting mail-in ballots, and it's happening in some key states like Florida, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. And in Florida, something really interesting is happening and something different. So usually, traditionally, Republicans Republicans send in more mail-in ballots than Democrats do. But right now, Democrats are leading Republicans. And if you do a little arithmetic here, you subtract this, you carry, no, I'm just joking. The difference right here is 136,000. Why is this important? Because Donald Trump won this state, Florida, and the 29 electoral votes by 113,000 votes, and already Democrats have more mail-in ballots in. George?
Past algebra. Okay. Thank you, Tom. Let's bring in Nate Silver, who actually is a math genius and a statistics genius. And your forecast has really significantly shifted over the last week.
Yeah, Trump wasn't in terrific shape to begin with, but he's now down to around a 15 or a 16% chance of winning the Electoral College. He was at 22 before the debate. So part of it is just time running off the clock. He needs things to go well for him. He was behind before. And instead you have potentially a 9 or 10 point lead in national polls, which are numbers we haven't seen since 1988 with Michael Dukakis versus George Bush.
And Nate, the chances that Donald Trump can actually win the popular vote are really falling dramatically. Also, the chances of a contested election seem to be falling.
Yeah, look, if Biden, so he's now up by 4 or 5 points all of a sudden in Florida. If a Biden 4 or 5 point win on Florida on election night, Florida counts its votes quickly. You cannot return your ballot after election day. And Florida is a must-win state for Trump. So if Biden were to win, we could say with 90-something% confidence that if he won Florida, he'd win the Electoral College. So again, the modal scenario here is a pretty big Biden win. In fact, if the polls are off by as much as they were in 2016, you still have a fairly comfortable Biden win. That's what you get when you have an 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 point lead in all these national polls.
Nate Silver, thanks very much. Let's bring in our roundtable now, starting with our chief political analyst, Matthew Dowd. And Matthew, you've worked on vice presidential debates in the past. As I said at the top of the broadcast, they're usually a sideshow. But with Joe Biden, 78 next month, Donald Trump's health crisis so important this time around.
Yeah, I think vice presidential debates don't change the entire nature of a race, but they can impact a race. And let me explain. In 2004, I did Dick Cheney's debate prep, and it was in the aftermath of George Bush losing the debate to John Kerry, the first debate in St. Louis. And my whole point to him was you have to put a tourniquet on and stop the blood from running. And I think for Pence and for this debate, for him, he has to do something to stop the slow buildup in the Biden lead in this. And conversely, Kamala Harris wants to keep the momentum going. But I think there's another reason why this debate could matter. We don't have any idea if we're going to hold future debates because of the president's health and what's going on in that and the protocols in that. This may be, it could possibly be, we don't know if we're going to have a debate next week and what happens in the future. This possibly could be the last time we hear from the presidential candidates in this kind of setting, which puts even more heat and light on what's going on in this debate.
Not if the president has anything to do with it. He said he wants to be at this next debate 100%. Yvette Simpson, we also are seeing some history tonight. The first woman of color ever to appear on a national ticket debating in this vice presidential debate.
It is a big deal, and I bet you that black and brown girls and black and brown not so young girls are watching this thinking that could be me. And I think the pride that is going to be felt around the country, breaking barriers, not just for brown and black girls, but also for white girls, to see themselves reflected on the stage is going to be amazing. And I think Kamala Harris has a big job ahead of her. Unfortunately, Pence tends to hide his pathology and his extremism under a smile and a soft tone. And so her willingness and ability to make sure that she holds him solely responsible for the coronavirus response, which was in his lap, for the extremist views that he has around the Supreme Court pick is going to be a big, big deal. And so I hope that she does not let up. I hope she holds his feet to the fire and exposes him for who he really is.
Rahm, thank you, Yvette. Rahm Emanuel, those two candidates on the stage representing two very different Americas.
Yeah, they're a tableau. I mean, a lot of people are talking about style or what their backgrounds are, but they're a tableau of two different Americas. One is obviously a born-again Christian evangelical, started in talk radio medium, and worked his way up to obviously the vice president. Another person, the daughter of two immigrants who came to America, believed in America and the American dream and wanted that and worked hard and suffered for their children to achieve that. And both of them represent a cultural tableau and I think really personify that. The second thing is both of these candidates are understudies for 2024. This is the first debate of the year 2024. And they're obviously as vice presidential, but they are also debuting. And I would call this the first vice presidential debate of 2020 and the first debate of 2024 because they're auditioning for that post day.
Okay, Ron, thanks. Sarah Fagan, how does Mike Pence talk to the audience at home and the audience in the Oval Office?
Well, it's a tricky job that he has because in many ways he has to divorce the rhetoric that the president has around COVID and some of the inconsistencies we've seen out of the president in terms of what he said with the facts of the task force which he leads. He's going to have to try to make the case to the American people that, look, I don't always agree with Donald Trump myself and how he approaches these things, but if you look at the facts, we've done a good job since March. We don't have challenges with PPE in this country any longer. We have enough ventilators. We've had advancements with therapeutics. We've seen that with the president himself on camera today. And so we've made a lot of progress, and he's got to do that calmly. He's got to try to instill in confidence in the American people that this White House actually is doing a pretty good job on this, despite the fact that the president oftentimes steps on their message.
Sarah Fagan, thanks. Byron Pitts, Kamala Harris has never done this in a national race. Who's got the tougher job tonight?
Well, George, I think they both have tough jobs. I think Mike Pence, one could argue, has a tougher job because he has to defend an actual record, the president's record, COVID, the economy, this racial divide. As for Kamala Harris, she has to present herself to the nation. She will be a new face to many Americans who will see her for the first time in this setting. She has to talk about the potential that of what a Biden-Harris administration might represent. But I think arguably the heavier burden tonight is on Mike Pence because, as you know, George, last week we had a food fight. Issues weren't discussed. It's on Mike Pence tonight to discuss those issues to make the argument why this administration deserves 4 more years.
Byron Pitts, thank you. We'll be right back with Karine Jean-Pierre, the Chief of Staff to Kamala Harris.
ABC News, straightforward.
Welcome to Disney Plus. Are you ready? Drop in and explore. The action, the adventure, and the originals. There's no limit to what you'll find. These are your worlds. So come on, dive deeper into the universes you love. Wherever and whenever you want them, you'll find them all here on Disney Plus.
On your carts. Get set. Let's go.
Get ready.
The team with the highest card total could be leaving with $100,000
to shop.
Bam, bam, bam.
Till you drop.
Oh, mommy down.
Leslie Jones hosts Supermarket Sweep. Premieres Sunday, October 18th on ABC.
I'm very thankful that these men are fine.
Tuesday, October 13th, we respect your wishes. The Bachelorette is back.
This is the perfect place to fall in love.
But respect the rumors.
Do not ever talk to me like that.
It's true.
What?
This is the most shocking season ever.
Makes me sick.
That's crazy.
Do declare.
Congratulations, you've just blown up The Bachelorette.
The Bachelorette season premiere Tuesday, October 13th on ABC.
The waters of the Outer Banks are unforgiving and full of riches for the fishermen who dare. The best of the Northern Fleet are heading south. But the locals know where the giants lie. And if you thought the waters were unforgiving, wait until the battle begins. Wicked Tuna Outer Banks. New episodes Sundays at 9 on National Geographic.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's most watched program across all of television. Okay, if you're starring in the hit show being called Fantastic and Glorious, what are you doing tomorrow morning? Well, if you're Jason Schwartzman and Jack Houston, you're bringing a little Fargo with you to America's #1 morning show. ABC's Good Morning America tomorrow.
It was a fairy tale love story.
He was the closest to Prince Charming.
That George Clooney feel, sexy. She was swept off her feet.
He would record these video love messages to me.
I love you very much.
Then he proposed, planning an A-list wedding. And
we're getting married by the Pope. Oh. No, I'm not joking. We're getting married by the Pope.
But it's complicated.
What if this is all a lie?
I'm Whoopi Goldberg, and this is The Con.
Premieres Wednesday on ABC.
Now, with so much on the line, ABC News, America's #1 news, is right there for you live on Hulu with stories of strength, stories of hope. Because now, when it matters most,
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news.
Hulu has live news, and that news is ABC News.
ABC News Live on Hulu.
ABC News Live on Hulu.
Watch the news you need.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Streaming to all Hulu subscribers right now. Thank you for making World News Tonight with David Muir, America's most watched newscast.
Levels surreal in terms of it all, and I don't necessarily want to be the fact checker. At the same time, you know, depending on how far he goes with whatever he does, you know, he's going to have to be accountable for what he said.
Kamala Harris reflecting on how she's going to handle tonight's debate, her first debate on a national stage like this. Let's bring in her Chief of Staff, Karine Jean-Pierre. So we know she's not going to be a fact checker, Karine. So what is the senator going to do?
Hey, George, so good to see you. Thank you for having me. Look, Senator is going to be prepared. She has debated before, clearly, when she ran for Senate, Attorney General, District Attorney in California. So she is prepared. She has a great debate team, very diverse debate team that has prepared her for this moment, for this vice presidential debate. And look, we all know Mike Pence is a very good debater. He's been successful at debates. And I think the point that she was trying to make there is he has great lines, but sometimes good lines are not truth. And so he's going to try and deflect, and he's going to try and distort the lies. And here's the thing, it is not up to her to fact check. It's going to be up to the media. It's going to be up to the moderator. And of course, our campaign will be fact checking him as well. And so that's what she was leaning into when she's talking about it. So what Kamala Harris is going to do tonight is she's going to bring the case forward on why a Biden-Harris administration could lead to a different America. And honestly, George, this debate is about Donald Trump's failure to contain COVID-19. And not just that, but to also help working families. And not just the last 6 months or 7 months, really the last 4 years. And Joe Biden said this last week, actually, during his debate. And he said, this is not about him, and it's not about Donald Trump. It's about the millions of Americans who are suffering right now in this once-in-a-generation pandemic.
But, Karine, how has the president's illness changed your strategy, if at all?
I mean, you have a president right now, when he left the White House, he decided that he was going to make a campaign ad by removing his mask. His rhetoric has been incredibly dangerous. And here's the thing, George, this is not a hoax. We haven't turned the corner on this pandemic. This is very real. More than 210,000 souls have died. We're talking about grandmothers, grandfathers, fathers, mothers, people who we love dearly, neighbors have died from this virus, and we still are behind. George, we're behind as a country when it comes to containing this virus. And why is that? Is because of the mismanagement of Donald Trump. And that's what we're seeing very, very clearly. And even Donald Trump's state tragedy that he believes that he was blessed to have this virus when people are suffering. They're suffering.
Karine Jean-Pierre, thanks very much. Debate is less than half an hour away. We'll be right back.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's most watched program across all of television.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
Where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up. I'm very thankful that these men are fine.
Tuesday, October 13th, we respect your wishes. The Bachelorette is back.
This is the perfect place to fall in love.
But respect the rumors.
Do not ever talk to me like that.
It's true. What? This is the most shocking season ever.
Makes me sick.
That's crazy. Do declare.
Congratulations, you've just blown up The Bachelorette.
The Bachelorette season premiere Tuesday, October 13th on ABC.
Hello? This is Montana Highway Patrol. You're looking for a couple of missing teenagers. That's right. Last seen in a red Focus.
The steering wheel is getting stiff. Lock the door. We're fine.
Got ourselves a predicament.
When the night has come.
Cross my office off the list. What if we pick for each other?
Please stop.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
Your cards. Get set. Let's go.
Get ready.
The team with the highest card total could be leaving with $100,000.
To shop.
Bam, bam, bam.
Till you drop.
Oh, mommy down.
Leslie Jones hosts Supermarket Sweep. Premieres Sunday, October 18th on ABC.
Right now, at this defining moment in America, with so much on the line.
We gon' be alright. We gon' be alright.
From ABC News, Turning Point, the groundbreaking special Nightline series. Taking over, taking on. This moment for America. My America, your America, our America. This is Turning Point, the special Nightline series.
We gon' be alright.
Late night on ABC.
Welcome to Disney Plus. Are you ready? Drop in and explore. The action, the adventure, and the originals. There's no limit to what you'll find. These are your worlds. So come on. Dive deeper into the universes you love. Wherever and whenever you want them. You'll find them all here on Disney Plus.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know seems to change, well, like every day. So what can help you feel smarter, better, happier? Welcome to GMA3, What You Need to Know, the third hour of Good Morning America. Lunchtime on ABC.
You know, I think she is a skilled debater, but I can't wait to get to Salt Lake City and be on the stage with her.
Mike Pence discussing his debate with Kamala Harris. Let's talk to his chief of staff now, Mark Short, who joins us right now. Mark, I said at the top of the broadcast that the vice president had a good debate against Tim Kaine 4 years ago. Very different opponent this year, 4 years of a record to defend.
Well, sure, George. Thanks for having me on. The Vice President's a very gifted communicator, and I think he looks forward to being able to share with the American people not just what we've accomplished over the last 4 years, but we look forward to doing over the next 4. But as you said, the senator is also a very skilled debater and obviously has a record as a prosecutor. So I think it'll be a very engaging conversation for the American people, and hopefully one that shows the clear contrast and visions between the two campaigns.
That's the vision going forward. How about the vice president's record as head of the coronavirus task force? We saw from Karine Jean-Pierre, it's very clear that Senator Harris is going to at least try to prosecute that case, and she says the vice president will try to deflect and lie in response.
Well, I think that the Vice President will be able to share with the American people what we've done to be able to make sure that more Americans are protected, whether or not that is from when we started up testing to now having over 100 million tests completed and another 150 million before the end of the year, farther than any other country. We provided personal protective equipment to make sure that patients are protected and first responders are protected. What we've done as far as therapeutics that I think is something that the rest of the world is envious of the amount of therapeutics we have now to treat American patients and the progress we're making on vaccines, that unfortunately the other side looks to undermine the science and continues to undermine the vaccinations. They're being produced by American companies to make sure that more Americans are safe. And their continuing undermining of that science means fewer people entering the trials, which only delays vaccinations to be able to get to the American people. So I think that the Vice President will be able to lay all that out and contrast it candidly with some of the failures that the Biden administration had during the H1N1 outbreak.
You talked about the therapeutics, including Regeneron. The president had that video earlier today talking about Regeneron, calling it a cure and saying that he hopes that everyone will be able to get it for free. Is that the position of the task force, that it's a cure and we're going to be looking for free distribution?
Well, George, I think that what we've seen is enormous progress with therapeutics. We're very excited with the results that we're seeing, and there are many trials going on with multiple different types of therapeutics, not just Regeneron. So we're encouraged by that. As far as the ability to provide that for free, I think that is something that we hope to be able to do. As you know, we've pre-purchased vaccinations so that they can be manufactured. So the day the FDA approves them, they're actually distributed to Americans all across the country. That's something that has never happened before with vaccinations, where you actually purchase 100 million vaccinations, so that the day FDA says this is safe, we can begin that distribution. It's being done through the Department of Defense to make sure it gets across the country as fast as possible. Usually there's a lag between when FDA completes it and when actually the production is built up so that Americans can receive it. So yeah, we're very encouraged with the progress we're making on both therapeutics and vaccinations.
Mark Short, thanks very much. Debate less than 20 minutes away. We'll be right back.
ABC News, straightforward. It's being called the most consequential election of a lifetime, the most important vote, and with so much on the line, it demands the most straightforward, news-making, real answers, the most informed voices from all sides. The countdown is on to the vote. What will our future look like? ABC's This Week with George. It all plays out right here every Sunday.
The most consequential week yet of this hyper-political year.
Right as you get closer to casting your vote every Sunday on ABC.
It was a fairy tale love story.
He was the closest to Prince Charming.
That George Clooney feel, sexy.
She was swept off her feet.
He would record these video love messages to me.
I love you very much.
Then he proposed, planning an A-list wedding. And
we're getting married by the Pope. Oh. No, I'm not joking. We're getting married by the Pope.
But it's complicated.
What if this is all a lie?
I'm Whoopi Goldberg, and this is The Con.
Premieres Wednesday on ABC.
Welcome to Disney Plus. Are you ready? Drop in and explore. The action, the adventure, and the originals. There's no limit to what you'll find. These are your worlds. So come on, dive deeper into the universes you love. Wherever and whenever you want them, you'll find them all here on Disney Plus.
Hello? This is Montana Highway Patrol. You're looking for a couple of missing teenagers. That's right. Last seen in a red Focus.
The steering wheel is getting stiff. Lock the door. We're fine.
Got ourselves a predicament.
When the night has come.
The waters of the Outer Banks are unforgiving and full of riches for the fishermen who dare. The best of the Northern Fleet are heading south, but the locals know where the giants lie. And if you thought the waters were unforgiving, wait until the battle begins. Wicked Tuna Outer Banks. New episodes Sundays at 9 on National Geographic.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop. Original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, and it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you. ABC News Live. It's that easy to go there.
Now could be a good time to have another baby.
Are you crazy? I'm in love with you. Now that I said it out loud, it does sound weird. Please stop.
When I see you were so fine, I had to remind myself to breathe.
Feel something when I see you. Let's do this.
How's your quarantine going?
They're sending out tens of millions of ballots, unsolicited, not where they're being asked, but unsolicited. And that's a hoax. And you're going to need to have 9 justices.
President Trump explaining why he wants Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court, continuing his complaints about a possible rigged election. Of course, he has not provided evidence to back up that claim, but we want to bring in our legal team now to talk about how this might come up in tonight's debate. Let's start with Terry Moran right there. Terry, even though we now have 3 Republican senators who've also contracted COVID, it's clearly, according to Senate Judiciary Chair Lindsey Graham and the head of the Republicans in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, full speed ahead on Amy Coney Barrett.
Full speed ahead, and they still have the votes to do it, George. There's no question the Republicans want to vote her out of committee, vote her on the Senate floor into the court, and have her confirmed before the election. And President Trump has hinted that he wants her on the court just in case there's a contested election. Now, Democrats have said, well, maybe she should recuse herself from any such case. But now Amy Coney Barrett has made clear that she will not do that. She will only recuse in the event of a case involving her husband or sister, who are lawyers, or Notre Dame, where she teaches. And she is the one who decides that under the law. There's no one who can make her. That said, on the Democrat side, there are problems. Progressives want the Democrats to go after her hammer and tongs in these hearings, but the Biden campaign wants them to use these hearings, since essentially it's a done deal, to highlight issues that will help him in the election. For example, she is on the record saying that Roe versus Wade should be overturned and the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, should be struck down. So there's a contest between how much do you want to go after and how much do you want to use her to make political points.
Okay, Terry, thanks. Kate Shaw, those are questions for her confirmation hearings, which begin on Monday if everything goes according to schedule. But no question, they will also come up tonight. Mike Pence, of course, was the governor of Indiana. As Terry said, Amy Coney Barrett taught at Notre Dame.
That's right. And, you know, the nomination, I think, will come up. You know, the Republicans, Trump, and I think very much wanted this to be a story that he could use, focus on this nomination. And yet I think the Rose Garden ceremony, September 26th, that looks potentially to have been a super spreader event. At least a dozen people who were at that ceremony testing positive so far for COVID, obviously including the president and first lady, I think kind of casts a pall over the entire nomination. Nevertheless, Senate Republicans are charging forward with it. I do think that tonight there will be questions for Vice President Pence about things like Roe versus Wade. When President Trump was asked about the future of Roe in the presidential debate, he got a little cagey, despite having promised for years to appoint justices who would vote to overturn Roe. You know, he sort of equivocated. He said, we don't know how she would vote in a case that asked to overturn Roe. So I think it'll be important to ask the Vice President, do you believe Justice Barrett would vote to overturn Roe versus Wade? And to see if he's noncommittal as well, or whether he sort of leans in and says yes, and that's one of the reasons we think it's so important that she be confirmed.
We will see if Susan Page, the moderator, brings that up tonight as well. Dan Abrams, Kamala Harris, we've talked about her as a prosecutor. She's also a member of the Judiciary Committee, so she'll be questioning Judge Barrett at those confirmation hearings. Tonight, likely to also get questions about her record on criminal justice.
That's right, both as an attorney general and a district attorney. And thus far, the questions that have been asked of her have typically been from the left. Those saying she wasn't progressive enough as a prosecutor, that she didn't have enough police accountability, that she supported the death penalty. And yet tonight, expect to see Mike Pence come at her from the right, saying that she doesn't support police enough. So it's going to be very interesting to see the tightrope that she has to walk here without sort of distancing herself too much from what she's already said. Also expect her, I think, as a prosecutor, to take some of the more outrageous comments that the president has made about COVID and about election security and try to force Mike Pence to say, do you agree with this? Are you going to say that you support that?
Yeah, we actually saw in some of these Senate debates where Senate candidates have been put on the spot on whether or not they defend President Trump's record, are proud of their support of him. Dan Abrams, thanks very much. We'll be right back. The debate's only 10 minutes away.
ABC News, straightforward. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's most watched program across all of television.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
Where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up.
Hello? This is Montana Highway Patrol. You're looking for a couple of missing teenagers. That's right. Last seen in a red Focus.
The steering wheel is getting stiff.
Lock the door. We're fine.
Got ourselves a predicament.
When the night has come.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know seems to change, well, like every day. So what can help you feel smarter, better, happier? Welcome to GMA3, What You Need to Know, the third hour of Good Morning America. Lunchtime on ABC.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
On your carts. Get set. Let's go.
Get ready.
The team with the highest card total could be leaving with $100,000.
To shop.
Bam, bam, bam.
Till you drop.
Oh, mommy down.
Leslie Jones hosts Supermarket Sweep. Premieres Sunday, October 18th on ABC.
Welcome to Disney Plus. Are you ready? Drop in and explore. The action, the adventure, and the originals. There's no limit to what you'll find. These are your worlds. So come on, dive deeper into the universes you love. Wherever and whenever you want them, you'll find them all here on Disney Plus.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop. Original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, and it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you.
ABC News Live. It's that easy to go there.
With today's extraordinary news cycle,
Now is the perfect time for ABC News Live.
addressed
Leadership.
passion and integrity.
The actual policies that are going to take place.
The clear plan for full employment for the American people.
I want it to be more about what each candidate can offer.
In this debate, I'd like to see a reason to vote for someone rather than against somebody.
That is what the voters are looking for. The debate just about 5 minutes away. David Muir, what's the big thing you're looking for?
Wow, impossible to overstate this, George. We have never seen this before. A president battling a virus at the White House in a pandemic that's taken 200 110,000 lives. And Joe Biden, if elected, the oldest president-elect ever. Both of these candidates have to make the case they're ready on day one, but which one of them will remember that this is not just a story about a president with the virus. This is about millions of Americans at home who have felt this, are living through it, who have lost loved ones, and want to know which ticket is best suited to guide us through this as a country.
The pandemic defining 2020. Lindsay Davis.
Which Kamala Harris is going to show up? Is she going to be that fierce former prosecutor here to prosecute and make a case not just about President Trump, but also Mike Pence by extension, and also as head of the coronavirus task force? A lot of people have commended and praised her skills as a debater, but certainly Mike Pence is no slouch. And more than anything, he is masterful when it comes to playing the game of dodgeball. I think that if she wants to move the needle at all, she has to come with it to really pin him down and make sure he answers those questions. I think that's her biggest challenge.
Mike Pence, a former TV anchor. Rahm Emanuel.
Two things. On Kamala Harris's side, everybody knows that she's a former prosecutor and can prosecute a case, but can she present an argument for why a Biden-Harris administration matters to your family and their future? On Mike Pence's side, he has to make an argument on behalf of Donald Trump, which is, yes, his rhetoric is bombastic. Yes, his style gets on you, grates on you. But there's more here than meets the eye. And I think the burden is harder on him because now people have had 3.5 years of exposure, and they're firmly rejecting that exposure, what they've seen, what they got, and what they don't want.
That's reflected in the polls right now, at least. Sarah Fagan.
Look, can Mike Pence effectively make the case at just how liberal Kamala Harris is? She is far to the left of anybody who's been a presidential or vice presidential nominee for the Democratic Party in modern history, ever. Can you make that case?
Yvette Simpson.
Thoughts and prayers to Mike Pence. Debating a black woman is not an easy thing, and he's going to find that out tonight. And if I'm Kamala Harris, I'm focusing on his failed coronavirus response. He could not protect his own office, let alone our country. 34 cases in the White House. That's more than 3 countries, Taiwan, Vietnam, and New Zealand combined. And I would nail him on that, as well as his extreme views on abortion, on immigration, and others.
So to answer Lindsay's question, you're expecting the prosecutor, Kamala Harris, tonight?
I do, in part because we know that Pence, because of his tone, gets away with standing behind Donald Trump and also telling lies. And I think she's going to have to hold him account. I think she also has the big job of putting forward real issues, and I think that's going to be a big challenge for her today. I think she'll rise to it, though.
Okay, Yvette, thanks very much. Matthew Dowd.
To me, truth and science is on the table tonight, and it's a big thing. Can Mike Pence defend him as head of the task force and Donald Trump from all the science and all the truth they've ignored along the way? And will Kamala Harris prosecute the case against them for ignoring the truth and for ignoring science in the midst of this global pandemic?
Martha Raddatz, you've been a moderator like Susan Page tonight. She's got the total choice of which topics to bring up. Kamala Harris doesn't have any significant foreign policy experience. Of course, Mike Pence, 4 years as vice president.
Exactly. And I wouldn't be surprised, George, if you see Mike Pence try to turn away from coronavirus, certainly try to defend the administration's record, but turn to terrorism, turn to trying to get the troops out of Afghanistan and Iraq. We know he has guests, Kayla Mueller's parents there tonight. She is the young humanitarian aid worker who was killed by ISIS. Wouldn't be surprised if Pence presses that.
And thank you, Martha. Byron Pitts, the Trump campaign was trying to make law and order the big issue coming out of the summer. It's now been eclipsed again by the coronavirus. How does Mike Pence, does he bring it back?
Well, George, I would think not. I would imagine that's the point that Kamala Harris will make. She'll make the argument that there's a racial divide in America. Mike Pence has said race isn't a problem in America. We'll see who makes that case better tonight.
And John Carl, thank you, Byron. John Carl, as I said at the top of the broadcast, Mike Pence has never allowed any daylight to show between him and Donald Trump. Can he get through 90 minutes tonight of that?
Well, and I'm going to give you 2 specifics. One is on that Mike Pence led the coronavirus task force. Will he acknowledge anything could have or should have been differently in the administration's handling of that crisis? And one specific on Kamala Harris, neither she nor Joe Biden have answered the question, do they favor expanding the Supreme Court? That's a big issue, and it's a question that they should answer in this campaign.
Yeah, and it was clear that the vice president did not want to answer that last week. One other question, though, on that, John. First on Mike Pence, even behind the scenes, any ever hint of disagreement?
Never, George. And I have spent a lot of time with Mike Pence over the past 3.5 years, never heard any daylight between him and the president.
Okay, Cecilia Vega, you've covered the White House for the last 4 years. You've covered Kamala Harris when you worked in California.
Yeah, George, I'll be watching to see the role that race and gender play tonight. Unfair or not, Kamala Harris will be held to a different standard given the history that she is about to make on that stage. And on the Pence side, definitely watching to see how he can possibly defend the White House being this hotbed of infection that is right now, given that he is the head of the coronavirus task force.
34 cases now inside the White House, according to FEMA. The debate is less than 1 minute away. Mike Pence, Kamala Harris, moderator Susan Page of USA Today. We'll be right back with the start of the debate.
This is an ABC News special. In a week of unprecedented disruption, the wait is over. The person a president could rely on most takes center stage. Mike Pence.
In this election, it's not so much whether America will be more conservative or more liberal, more Republican or more Democrat. The choice in this election is whether America remains America.
Kamala Harris.
The constant chaos leaves us adrift. The incompetence makes us feel afraid. The callousness makes us feel alone. And here's the thing. We can do better.
The vice presidential debate, live from the University of Utah in Salt Lake City and ABC News election headquarters. Now reporting chief anchor George Stephanopoulos.
And welcome back to our special coverage of the race for the White House. Tonight's vice presidential debate now just moments away. That is the scene at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, where Vice President Mike Pence, Senator Kamala Harris are going to take a stage retrofitted with plexiglass shields to protect against COVID. Everyone not on stage will be wearing a mask. The moderator, you see her there, Susan Page, will direct 9 10-minute segments on topics of her choosing. Only she knows what they are. And despite what happened at last week's debate, no new rules have been put in place to keep things in order. Our correspondents Mary Bruce and Rachel Scott are inside the hall. And Mary, the Biden campaign insisted on these new COVID protections. We can expect that Senator Harris, a former prosecutor, is going to put Mike Pence's record as head of the coronavirus task force on the stand. We heard that from her chief of staff just moments ago.
George, Kamala Harris's goal here tonight is to put Mike Pence, the head of the coronavirus task force, on defense. She is known for those fierce cross-examinations, those feisty exchanges during congressional hearings. And tonight she's going to try to argue the case that this administration is failing the American people in responding to this crisis. I'm told not to expect her to spend a lot of time fact-checking. Aides say her aim here is not to eviscerate Mike Pence, but to instead speak directly to the American people about how a Biden-Harris White House would be leading differently in this moment. This is a national stage like she has never been on before, and tonight she is going to be making history here. The first black woman, the first Indian American to ever debate for vice president. Regardless of politics, George, this is a huge moment for women, especially for young girls across this country.
And we will see how she plays on that tonight. Rachel Scott, let me bring you in as well. Mike Pence has done this before 4 years ago against Tim Kaine, did pretty well 4 years ago, has a very different job tonight.
The fact of the matter is, George, this is not 2016, and right now the country is up against an unprecedented pandemic. And Vice President Mike Pence is the head of the coronavirus task force, so he will be put on defense tonight. He will have to defend the administration's handling of this pandemic. I'm told that he will largely focus on recovery, talk about jobs, talk about the economy bouncing back. But the reality here is that 26 million Americans are out of a job, and he will be facing some tough questions on that front, George.
Right, and the president has gone back and forth on the stimulus, the economic relief package over the last 24 hours. That is the stage right there. Moderator Susan Page will be speaking in just a few moments, outlining her goals for the debate, talking about the rules that she will be laying out as well. Everyone else in that hall wearing a mask tonight, unlike what we saw in Cleveland last week. Here's Susan Page.
Good evening. From the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, welcome to the first and only vice presidential debate of 2020, sponsored by the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm Susan Page of USA Today. It is my honor to moderate this debate, an important part of our democracy. In Kingsbury Hall tonight, we have a small and socially distant audience, and we've taken extra precautions during this pandemic. Among other things, everyone in the audience is required to wear a face mask, and the candidates will be seated 12 feet apart. The audience is enthusiastic about their candidates, but they've agreed to express that enthusiasm only twice, at the end of the debate and now when I introduce the candidates. Please welcome California Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence.
Thank you.
Senator Harris and Vice President Pence, thank you for being here. We're meeting as President Trump and the First Lady continue to undergo treatment in Washington after testing positive for COVID-19. We send our thoughts and prayers to them for their rapid and complete recovery and for the recovery of everyone afflicted by the coronavirus. The two campaigns and the Commission on Presidential Debates have agreed to the ground rules for tonight. I'm here to enforce them on behalf of the millions of Americans who are watching. One note, no one in either campaign or at the Commission or anywhere else has been told in advance what topics I'll raise or what questions I'll ask. This 90-minute debate will be divided into 9 segments of about 10 minutes each. I'll begin a segment by posing a question to each of you, sometimes the same question, sometimes a different question on the same topic. You will then have 2 minutes to answer without interruption by me or the other candidate. Then we'll take 6 minutes or so to discuss the issue. At that point, although there will always be more to say, we'll move on to the next topic. We want a debate that is lively, but Americans also deserve a discussion that is civil. These are tumultuous times, but we can and will have a respectful exchange about the big issues facing our nation. Let's begin with the ongoing pandemic that has cost our country so much. Senator Harris, the coronavirus is not under control. Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses and schools and hotspots? A federal mandate to wear masks? You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Thank you, Susan. Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment. And here's the thing. On January 28th, the Vice President and the President were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it is airborne, that it will affect young people, and that it would be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening, and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. The president said it was a hoax. They minimized the seriousness of it. The president said, you're on one side of his ledger if you wear a mask, you're on the other side of his ledger if you don't. And in spite of all of that, today they still don't have a plan. They still don't have a plan. Well, Joe Biden does. And our plan is about what we need to do around a national strategy for contact tracing, for testing, for administration of the vaccine, and making sure that it will be free for all. That is the plan that Joe Biden has and that I have, knowing that we have to get a hold of what has been going on, and we need to save our country And Joe Biden is the best leader to do that. And frankly, this administration has forfeited their right to re-election based on this.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, more than 210,000 Americans have died of COVID-19 since February. The U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population is higher than that of almost every other wealthy nation on earth. For instance, our death rate is 2.5 times that of Canada next door. You head the administration's coronavirus task force. Why is the U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population higher than that of almost every other wealthy country? And you have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Susan, thank you. And I want to thank the Commission and the University of Utah for hosting this event. And Senator Harris, it's a privilege to be on the stage with you. And our nation has gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China, President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done. And that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world. Now, Senator Joe Biden opposed that decision. He said it was xenophobic and hysterical. But I can tell you, having led the White House coronavirus task force, that that decision alone by President Trump bought us invaluable time to stand up the greatest national mobilization since World War II. And I believe it saved hundreds of thousands of American lives. Because with that time, we were able to reinvent testing. More than 115 million tests have been done to date. We were able to see to the delivery of billions of supplies so our doctors and nurses had the resources support they needed. And we began, really, before the month of February was out, to develop a vaccine and to develop medicines and therapeutics that have been saving lives all along the way. And under President Trump's leadership, Operation Warp Speed, we believe we'll have literally tens of millions of doses of a vaccine before the end of this year. The reality is, when you look at the Biden plan, it reads an awful lot like what President Trump and I and our task force have been doing every step of the way. I mean, quite frankly, when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine, it looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about. And I think the American people know that this is a president who has put the health of America first, and the American people, I believe with my heart, can be proud of the sacrifices they have made. It's saved countless American lives.
Senator Harris, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked. When you're looking at over 210,000 dead bodies in our country, American lives that have been lost, families that are grieving that loss. And you know, the vice president is the head of the task force and knew on January 28th how serious this was. And then thanks to Bob Woodward, we learned that they knew about it. And then when that was exposed, the vice president said, when asked, well, why didn't y'all tell anybody? He said, because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's get
no, but Susan, this is important.
Susan,
I want to add, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I'm
speaking.
Yeah, you can have 15 more seconds, and then we'll give the vice president a chance to respond.
So I want to ask the American people, how calm were you when you were panicked about where you're going to get your next roll of toilet paper? How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back? How calm were you when your children couldn't see your parents because you were afraid they could kill them?
Let's give Vice President Pence a chance to respond. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute to respond.
You know, there's not a day gone by that I haven't thought of every American family that's lost a loved one. And I want all of you to know that you'll always be in our hearts and in our prayers. But when you say what the American people have done over these last 8 months hasn't worked, that's a great disservice to the sacrifices the American people have made. The reality, if I may finish, Senator, the reality is Dr. Fauci said everything that he told the president in the Oval Office, the president told the American people. Now, President Trump, I will tell you, has boundless confidence in the American people, and he always spoke with confidence that we'd get through this together. But when you say it hasn't worked, when Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and our medical experts came to us in the second week of March, they said if the president didn't take the unprecedented step of shutting down roughly half of the American economy, that we could lose 2.2 million Americans. And that's the reality.
Thank you.
They also said to us, if we did everything right, Susan, we could still lose more than 200,000 Americans.
Vice President
Now, one
Pence,
life lost is too many, Susan. But the American people, I believe, deserve credit for the sacrifices that they have made, putting the health of their family and their neighbors first, our doctors, our nurses, our first responders.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago at what seems to have been a super spreader event for senior administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
Well, the American people have demonstrated over the last 8 months that when given the facts, they're willing to put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first. And President Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic, when we were losing a heartbreaking number of 2,500 Americans a day, we surged resources to New Jersey and New York and New Orleans and Detroit. We told the American people what needed to be done, and the American people made the sacrifices. When the outbreak in the Sun Belt happened this summer, again, Americans stepped forward. But the reality is the work of the President of the United States goes on. A vacancy on the Supreme Court of the United States has come upon us, and the President introduced Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
If I may say, that Rose Garden event, there's been a great deal of speculation about it. My wife Karen and I were there and honored to be there. Many of the people who were at that event, Susan, actually were tested for coronavirus, and it was an outdoor event, which all of our scientists regularly and routinely advise. The difference here is President Trump and I trust the American people to make choices in the best interest of their health. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care, the Green New Deal, all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Let's talk about respecting the American people. You respect the American people when you tell them the truth. You respect the American people when you have the courage to be a leader, speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves. But this administration stood on information that if you had as a parent, if you had as a worker, knowing you didn't have enough money saved up, and now you're standing in a food line because of the ineptitude of an administration that was unwilling to speak the truth to the American people. So let's talk about caring about the American people. The American people have had to sacrifice far too much because of the incompetence of this administration. It is asking too much of the people.
Susan, we talked about
it is asking too much of the people. That they would not be equipped with the information they need to help themselves to protect their parents and their children.
Sorry. Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, I'm sorry.
It's fine, I'm Kamala.
No, you're Senator Harris to me. For life to get back to normal, Dr. Anthony Fauci and other experts say that most of the people who can be vaccinated need to be vaccinated. But half of Americans now say they wouldn't take a vaccine if it was released now. If the Trump administration approves a vaccine before or after the election, should Americans take it, and would you take it?
If the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it, absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Vice President Pence, there have been a lot of repercussions from this pandemic. In recent days, the president's diagnosis of COVID-19 has underscored the importance of the job that you hold and that you are seeking. That's our second topic tonight. It's the role of the vice president. One of you will make history on January 20th. You will be the vice president to the oldest president the United States has ever had. Donald Trump will be 74 years old on Inauguration Day. Joe Biden will be 78 years old. That already has raised concerns among some voters, concerns that have been sharpened by President Trump's hospitalization in recent days. Vice President Pence, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan, thank you, although I would like to go back.
I think we need to move on to the issue of
Well, thank you, but I would like to go back because the reality is that we're going to have a vaccine, Senator, in record time, in unheard of time, in less than a year. We have 5 companies in phase 3 clinical trials, and we're right now producing tens of millions of doses. So the fact that you continue to undermine public confidence in a vaccine, if the vaccine emerges during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives. The reality is that we will have a vaccine, we believe, before the end of this year. And it will have the capacity to save countless American lives. And your continuous undermining of confidence in a vaccine is it's just unacceptable. And let me also say, you know, the reality is when you talk about failure in this administration, we actually do know what failure looks like in a pandemic. It was 2009. The swine flu arrived in the United States. Thankfully, it ended up not being as lethal as the coronavirus. But before the end of the year, when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu. If the swine flu had been as lethal as the coronavirus in 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives. His own chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say last year that it was pure luck that they did, quote, everything possible wrong. And we learned from that. They left the strategic national stockpile empty. They left an empty and hollow plan, but we still learned from it. And I think the American people, I'm going to say again, can be proud of what we have done. And Senator, please stop undermining confidence in a vaccine.
Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked Vice President Pence, which is, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with Vice President Biden about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, and if you win the election next month, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
So let me tell you, first of all, the day I got the call from Joe Biden, it was actually a Zoom call, asking me to serve with him on this ticket was probably one of the most memorable days of my life. I thought about my mother, who came to the United States at the age of 19, gave birth to me at the age of 25 at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. And the thought that I'd be sitting here right now, I know would make her proud, and she must be looking down on this. You know, Joe and I were raised in a very similar way. We were raised with values that are about hard work, about the value and the dignity of public service, and about the importance of fighting for the dignity of all people. And I think Joe asked me to serve with him because, you know, I have a career that included being elected the first woman district attorney of San Francisco, where I created models of innovation for law enforcement in terms of reform of the criminal justice system. I was elected the first woman of color and black woman to be elected Attorney General of the state of California, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice. And there I took on everything from transnational criminal organizations to the big banks that were taking advantage of homeowners to for-profit colleges that were taking advantage of veterans. And then, of course, now I serve in the United States Senate as only the second black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee, where I've been in regular receipt of classified information about threats to our nation and hotspots around the world. I've traveled the world. I've met with our soldiers in war zones. And I think Joe has asked me to serve with him because he knows that we share a purpose which is about lifting up the American people. And after the 4 years that we have seen of Donald Trump unifying our country around our common values and principles.
Thank you, Senator Harris. You know, neither President Trump nor Vice President Biden has released a sort of detailed health information that had become the modern norm until the 2016 election. And in recent days, President Trump's doctors have given misleading answers or refused to answer basic questions about his health. And my question to each of you in turn is this information voters deserve to know? Vice President Pence, would you like to go first?
Well, Susan, thank you. And let me say, on behalf of the President and the First Lady, how moved we've all been by the outpouring of prayers and concern for the President. And I do believe it's emblematic of the prayers and the concern that have ushered forth for every American impacted by the coronavirus. But the care the President received at Walter Reed Hospital, the White House doctors, was exceptional. And the transparency that they practiced all along the way will continue. The American people have a right to know about the health and well-being of their President, and will continue to do that. But I'm just extremely grateful and was more than a little moved by the broad and bipartisan support. And Senator, I want to thank you and Joe Biden for your expressions of genuine concern. And I also want to congratulate you, as I did on that phone call, on the historic nature of your nomination.
Thank you.
I never expected to be on this stage 4 years ago, so I know the feeling. But the reality is we've got an election before the American people in the midst of this challenging year. And the stakes have never been higher, but I think the choice has never been clearer.
I want to give Senator Harris a chance to respond to the same question I asked, which is, do voters have a right to know more detailed health information about presidential candidates and especially about presidents, especially when they're facing some kind of challenge?
Absolutely, and that's why Joe Biden has been so incredibly transparent, and certainly by contrast, the president has not, both in terms of health records, but also let's look at taxes. We now know, because of great investigative journalism, that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. When I first heard about it, I literally said, "You mean $750,000? And it was like, no, $750. We now know Donald Trump owes and is in debt for $400 million. And just so everyone is clear, when we say in debt, it means you owe money to somebody. And it'd be really good to know who the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, owes money to, because the American people have a right to know what is influencing the President's decisions. And is he making those decisions on the best interest of the American people, of you, or self-interest? So, Susan, I'm glad you asked about transparency, because it has to be across the board. Joe has been incredibly transparent over many, many years. The one thing we all know about Joe, he puts it all out there. He is honest, he is forthright. But Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been about covering up everything.
Thank you, Senator Harris. I want to give you a chance to respond, Vice President.
Well, look, I respect the fact that Joe Biden spent 47 years in public life. I respect your public service as well.
Thank you.
But the American people have a president who's a businessman, he's a job creator, who's paid tens of millions of dollars in taxes, payroll taxes, property taxes. He's created tens of thousands of American jobs. And the president said those public reports are not accurate. And the president's also released literally stacks of financial disclosures the American people can review just as the law allows. But the distinction here is that Joe Biden, 47 years in public service, compared to President Donald Trump, who brought all of that experience 4 years ago.
Thank you, Vice President.
And turned this economy around by cutting taxes, rolling back regulation, unleashing American energy, fighting for free and fair trade, and all of that's on the line if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
You know, that's a good segue into our third topic, which is about the economy. This has been another aspect of life for Americans that's been so affected by this coronavirus. We have a jobs crisis brewing. On Friday, we learned that the unemployment rate had declined to 7.9% in September, but the job growth had stalled, and that was before the latest round of layoffs and furloughs in the airline industry at Disney and elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of discouraged workers have stopped looking for work. Nearly 11 million jobs that existed at the beginning of the year haven't been replaced. Those hardest hit include Latinos, blacks, and women. Senator Harris, the Biden-Harris campaign has proposed new programs to boost the economy, and you would pay for that new spending by raising $4 trillion in taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations. Some economists warn that could curb entrepreneurial ventures that fuel growth and create jobs. Would raising taxes put the recovery at risk? And you have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
Thank you. On the issue of the economy, I think there couldn't be a more fundamental difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden believes you measure the health and the strength of America's economy based on the health and the strength of the American worker and the American family. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who measures the strength of the economy based on how rich people are doing, which is why he passed a tax bill benefiting the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America, leading to a $2 trillion deficit that the American people are going to have to pay for. On day one, Joe Biden will repeal that tax bill. He'll get rid of it. And what he'll do with the money is invest it in the American people. And through a plan that is about investing in infrastructure, something that Donald Trump said he would do. I remember hearing about some infrastructure week. I don't think it ever happened. But Joe Biden will do that. He'll invest in infrastructure. It's about upgrading our roads and bridges, but also investing in clean energy and renewable energy. Joe is going to invest that money in what we need to do around innovation. There was a time when our country believed in science and invested in research and development so that we were an innovation leader on the globe. Joe Biden will use that money to invest in education. So, for example, for folks who want to go to a 2-year community college, it will be free. If you come from a family that makes less than $125,000, you'll go to a public university for free. And across the board, we'll make sure that if you have student loan debt, it's cut by $10,000. That's how Joe Biden thinks about the economy, which is it's about investing in the people of our country, as opposed to passing a tax bill, which had the benefit of letting American corporations go offshore to do their business.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, your administration has been predicting a rapid and robust recovery, but the latest economic report suggests that's not happening. Should Americans be braced for an economic comeback that is going to take not months, but a year or more? You have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
When President Trump and I took office, America had gone through the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression. When Joe Biden was vice president, they tried to tax and spend and regulate and bail our way back to a growing economy. President Trump cut taxes across the board. Despite what Senator Harris says, the average American family of 4 had $2,000 in savings in taxes. And with the rise in wages that occurred, most predominantly for blue-collar, hardworking Americans, the average household income for a family of 4 increased by $4,000 following President Trump's tax cuts. But America, you just heard Senator Harris tell you, on day one, Joe Biden's going to raise your taxes. It's really remarkable to think, Susan.
That's not what I said.
I mean, right after a time where we're going through a pandemic that lost 22 million jobs at the height, we've already added back 11.6 million jobs because we had a president who cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, fought for free and fair trade, and secured $4 trillion from the Congress of the United States to give direct payments to families, save 50 million jobs through the Paycheck Protection Program. We literally have spared no expense to help the American people and the American worker through this. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want to raise taxes. They want to bury our economy under a $2 trillion Green New Deal, which you were one of the original co-sponsors of in the United States Senate. They want to abolish fossil fuels and ban fracking, which would cost hundreds of thousands of American jobs all across the heartland. And Joe Biden wants to go back to the economic surrender to China, that when we took office, half of our international trade deficit was with China alone. And Joe Biden wants to repeal all of the tariffs that President Trump put into effect to fight for American jobs and American workers. Joe Biden says democracy's on the ballot. Make no mistake about it, Susan. The American economy, the American comeback is on the ballot with 4 more years of growth and opportunity, 4 more years of President Donald Trump. 2021 is going to be the biggest economic year in the history of this country.
Thank you, Vice President Pence. Senator Harris.
Well, I mean, I thought we saw enough of it in last week's debate, but I think this is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well, wait.
I'm speaking.
It'd be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. That was tax cuts that gave the average working family $2,000 in a tax break every single year. Senator,
that is absolutely not true. That
is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
If you don't mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation, okay?
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act that brought America back. And now the Trump-Pence administration wants to take credit when they rode the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term. Of course, now the economy is a complete disaster. But Joe Biden, on the one hand, did that. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who has reigned over a recession that is being compared to the Great Depression. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who was responsible with President Barack Obama for the Affordable Care Act, which brought health care to over 20 million Americans and protected people with pre-existing conditions. And what it also did is it saved those families who otherwise were going bankrupt because of hospital bills they could not afford. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who's in court right now, trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which means that you will lose protections if you have pre-existing conditions. And this is very important, Susan.
Yes,
and it's important.
We need to give Vice President.
He interrupted me, and I'd like to just finish, please. If you have a pre-existing condition, heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer, they're coming for you. If you love someone who has a pre-existing condition, they're coming for you. If you are under the age of 26 on your parents' coverage, they're coming for you.
Senator Harris, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me give you a chance to respond.
Well, I hope we have a chance to talk about health care, because Obamacare was a disaster. The American people remember it well. And President Trump and I have a plan to improve health care and to protect pre-existing conditions for every American. But look, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. You yourself said on multiple occasions when you were running for president that you would ban fracking. Joe Biden looked at a supporter in the eye and pointed and said, I guarantee that we will abolish fossil fuels. They have a $2 trillion version of the Green New Deal, Susan, that your newspaper, USA Today, said really wasn't that very different from the original Green New Deal. More taxes, more regulation, banning fracking, abolishing fossil fuel, crushing American energy, and economic surrender to China is a prescription for economic decline. President Trump and I will keep America growing. The V-shaped recovery that's underway right now will continue with 4 more years of President Donald Trump in the White House.
Thank you very, very much, Vice President Pence. Once again, you've provided the perfect segue to a new topic, which is climate change. And Vice President Pence, I'd like to pose the first question to you. This year, we've seen record-setting hurricanes in the South. Another one, Hurricane Delta, is now threatening the Gulf. And we have seen record-setting wildfires in the West. Do you believe, as the scientific community has concluded, that man-made climate change has made wildfires bigger, hotter, and more deadly, and have made hurricanes wetter, slower, and more damaging? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. Well, first, I'm very proud of our record on the environment and on conservation. According to all of the best estimates, our air and land are cleaner than any time ever recorded. And our water is among the cleanest in the world. And just a little while ago, the President signed the Outdoors Act. It's the largest investment in our public lands and public parks in 100 years. So President Trump has made a commitment to conservation and to the environment. Now, with regard to climate change, the climate is changing. But the issue is, what's the cause and what do we do about it? President Trump has made it clear that we're going to continue to listen to the science. Now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would put us back in the Paris Climate Accord. They'd impose the Green New Deal, which would crush American energy, would increase the energy costs of American families in their homes, and literally would crush American jobs. And President Trump and I believe that the progress that we have made in a cleaner environment has been happening precisely because we have a strong free market economy. You know, what's remarkable is the United States has reduced CO2 more than the countries that are still in the Paris Climate Accord, but we've done it through innovation, and we've done it through natural gas and fracking, which, Senator, the American people can go look at the record. I know Joe Biden says otherwise now, as you do, but the both of you repeatedly committed to abolishing fossil fuel and banning fracking. And so by creating the kind of American innovation, we're actually steering toward a stronger and better environment. With regard to wildfires, President Trump and I believe that forest management has to be front and center, and even Governor Gavin Newsom from your state has agreed we've got to work on forest management. And with regard to hurricanes, the National Oceanic Administration tells us that actually as difficult as they are,
Thank you, Vice President.
There are no more hurricanes today than there were 100 years ago.
Thank you.
But many of the climate alarmists use hurricanes and wildfires to try and sell their bill of goods of a Green New Deal. And President Trump and I are going to always put American jobs and American workers first.
Senator Harris, as the Vice President mentioned, you co-sponsored the Green New Deal in Congress. But Vice President Biden said in last week's debate that he does not support the Green New Deal. But if you look at the Biden-Harris campaign website, it describes the Green New Deal as a crucial framework. What exactly would be the stance of a Biden-Harris administration toward the Green New Deal? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Sure. So first of all, I will repeat, and the American people know, that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact. That is a fact. I will repeat that Joe Biden has been very clear that he thinks about growing jobs, which is why he will not increase taxes for anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. Joe Biden's economic plan, Moody's, which is a reputable Wall Street firm, has said will create 7 million more jobs than Donald Trump's. And part of those jobs that will be created by Joe Biden are going to be about clean energy and renewable energy. Because you see, Joe understands that the west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed because of floods. And so Joe believes, again, in science. I'll tell you something, Susan. I served, when I first got to the Senate, on the committee that's responsible for the environment. Do you know this administration took the word science off the website and then took the phrase climate change off the website? We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs. Donald Trump, when asked about the wildfires in California, and the question was, you know, the science is telling us this, you know what Donald Trump said? Science doesn't know. So let's talk about who is prepared to lead our country over the course of the next 4 years on what is an existential threat to us as human beings. Joe is about saying we're going to invest that in renewable energy. It's going to be about the creation of millions of jobs. We will achieve net zero emissions by 2050, carbon neutral by 2035. Joe has a plan. This has been a lot of talk from the Trump administration, and really it has been to go backward instead of forward. We will also re-enter the climate agreement with pride.
Senator Harris just said that climate change is an existential threat. Vice President Pence, do you believe that climate change poses an existential threat?
As I said, Susan, the climate is changing. We'll follow the science. But once again, Senator Harris is denying the fact that they're going to raise taxes on every American. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that on day one he was going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. Those tax cuts delivered $2,000 in tax relief to the average family of 4 across America. And with regard to banning fracking, I just recommend that people look at the record. You yourself said repeatedly that you would ban fracking. You were the first Senate co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. And while Joe Biden denied the Green New Deal, Susan, thank you for pointing out, the Green New Deal is on their campaign website. And as USA Today said, it's essentially the same plan as you co-sponsored with AOC when she submitted it in the Senate. And you just heard the senator say that she's going to resubmit America to the Paris Climate Accord. Look, the American people have always cherished our environment. We'll continue to cherish it. We've made great progress reducing CO2 emissions through American innovation and the development of natural gas through fracking. We don't need a massive $2 trillion Green New Deal that would impose all new mandates on American businesses and American families.
Thank you.
Joe Biden wants us to retrofit 4 million American business buildings. It makes no sense. It will cost jobs. President Trump is going to put America first. He's going to put jobs first, and we're going to take care of our environment and follow the science.
Thank you. But, you know, on the issue of jobs,
Senator Harris,
let's talk about that. The vice president earlier referred to, as part of what he thinks is an accomplishment, the president's trade war with China. You lost that trade war. You lost it. What ended up happening is because of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Farmers have experienced bankruptcy because of it. We are in a manufacturing recession because of it. And when we look at where this administration has been, there are estimates that by the end of the term of this administration, they will have lost more jobs than almost any other presidential administration. And the American people know what I'm talking about. You know, I think about 20-year-olds. You know, we have a 20-year-old, 20-something-year-old, who are coming out of high school and college right now, and you're wondering, is there going to be a job there for me? We're looking at people who are trying to figure out how they're going to pay rent by the end of the month. Almost half of American renters are worried about whether they're going to be able to pay rent by the end of the month. This is where the economy is in America right now, and it is because of the catastrophe and the failure of leadership of this administration.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you just 15 seconds to respond, because then I want to move on to
I'd love to respond. Look, lost the trade war with China. Joe Biden never fought it. Joe Biden has been a cheerleader for communist China over the last several decades. And again, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. When Joe Biden was vice president, we lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs, and President Obama said they were never coming back. He said we needed a magic wand to bring them back. In our first 3 years after we cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, this administration saw 500,000 manufacturing jobs created. And that's exactly the kind of growth we're going to continue to see as we bring our nation through this pandemic. But a Green New Deal, your massive new mandates, your Paris Climate Accord, it's going to kill jobs this time, just like it killed jobs.
I just need to respond very briefly,
15 seconds, and
Thank you. Thank you. Joe Biden is responsible for saving America's auto industry, and you voted against it. So let's set the record straight. Thank you.
I'd like to talk about China. We have, as our next topic, we have no more complicated or consequential foreign relationship than the one with China. It is a huge market for American agricultural goods. It's a potential partner in dealing with climate change in North Korea. And in a video tonight, President Trump again blamed it for the coronavirus, saying China will pay. Vice President Pence, how would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Competitors, adversaries, enemies? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Susan. Well, before I leave that, let me speak to voting records if I can. You know, everybody knows that NAFTA cost literally thousands of American factories to close. We saw automotive jobs go south of the border. President Trump fought to renegotiate NAFTA. And the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is now the law of the land. American people deserve to know Senator Kamala Harris was one of only 10 members of the Senate to vote against the USMCA. It was a huge win for American auto workers. It was a huge win for American farmers, especially dairy in the upper Midwest. But Senator, you said it didn't go far enough on climate change, that you put your radical environmental agenda ahead of American auto workers and ahead of American jobs. The American people deserve to know that. It's probably why Newsweek magazine said that Kamala Harris was the most liberal member of the United States Senate in 2019, more liberal than Bernie Sanders, more liberal than any of the others in the United States Senate. So now, with regard to China, look, Susan, first and foremost, China is to blame for the coronavirus. And President Trump is not happy about it. He's made that very clear, made it clear again today. China and the World Health Organization did not play straight with the American people. They did not let our personnel into China to get information on the coronavirus until the middle of February. Fortunately, President Trump, in dealing with China from the outset of this administration, standing up to China that had been taking advantage of America for decades in the wake of Joe Biden's cheerleading for China, President Trump made that decision before the end of January to suspend all travel from China. And again, the American people deserve to know Joe Biden opposed President Trump's decision to suspend all travel from China. He said it was hysterical. He said it was xenophobic.
Vice President Pence.
But President Trump has stood up to China. We're going to continue to stand strong.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
We want to improve the relationship, but we're going to level the playing field, and we're going to hold China accountable for what they did to America with the coronavirus.
Thank you. Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked the Vice President. How would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Are we competitors, adversaries, enemies? You'll have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Susan, the Trump administration's perspective and approach to China has resulted in the loss of American lives, American jobs, and America's standing. There's a weird obsession that President Trump has had with getting rid of whatever accomplishment was achieved by President Obama and Vice President Biden. For example, they created within the White House an office that basically was responsible for monitoring pandemics. They got away, they got rid of it.
Not true.
There was a team of disease experts that President Obama and Vice President Biden dispatched to China to monitor what is now predictable and what might happen. They pulled them out. We now are looking at 210,000 Americans who have lost their lives. Let's look at the job situation. We mentioned before the trade deal, the trade war, they wanted to call it, with China. It resulted in the loss of over 300 manufacturing jobs and a manufacturing recession, and the American consumer paying thousands of dollars more for goods because of that failed war that they called it. Then let's talk about standing. Pew, a reputable research firm, has done an analysis that shows that leaders of all of our formerly allied countries have now decided that they hold in greater esteem and respect Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, than they do Donald Trump, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. This is where we are today because of a failure of leadership by this administration.
Senator Harris, we've seen changes in the role of the United States in terms of global leadership over the past 4 years. And of course, times do change. What's your definition? We've seen strains with China, of course, as the Vice President mentioned. We've seen strains with our traditional allies in NATO and elsewhere. What is your definition of the role of American leadership in 2020?
So, you know, Joe is, I love talking with Joe about a lot of these issues. And, you know, Joe, I think he said it quite well. He says, you know, foreign policy, it might sound complicated, but really it's relationships. So just think about it as relationships. And so we know this in our personal and professional relationships. You got to keep your word to your friends. You got to be loyal to your friends. People who've stood with you, you got to stand with them. You got to know who your adversaries are and keep them in check. But what we have seen with Donald Trump is that he has betrayed our friends and embraced dictators around the world. Let's take, for example, Russia. So Russia, I serve on the Intelligence Committee of the United States Senate. America's intelligence community told us Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States in 2016 and is playing in 2020. Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, said the same. But Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief of the United States of America, prefers to take the word of Vladimir Putin over the word of the American intelligence community. You look at our friends at NATO. He has walked away from agreements. You can look at the Iran nuclear deal, which now has put us in a position where we are less safe because they are building up what might end up being a significant nuclear arsenal. We were in that deal, guys. We were in the Iran nuclear deal with friends, with allies around the country. And because of Donald Trump's unilateral approach to foreign policy, coupled with his isolationism, he pulled us out and has made America less safe. So, Susan, it's about relationships. And the thing that has always been part of the strength of our nation, in addition to our great military, has been that we keep our word. But Donald Trump doesn't understand that because he doesn't understand what it means to be honest.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you a chance to respond.
Well, thank you. Well, President Trump kept his word when we moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel. When Joe Biden was vice president, they promised to do that, and they never did. We've stood strong with our allies, but we've been demanding. NATO is now contributing more to our common defense than ever before, thanks to President Trump's leadership. We've strengthened our alliances across the Asia-Pacific, and we've stood strong against those who would do us harm. You know, when President Trump came into office, ISIS had captured an area of the Middle East the size of Pennsylvania. But President Trump unleashed the American military, and our armed forces destroyed the ISIS caliphate and took down their leader, al-Baghdadi, without one American casualty. Al-Baghdadi was responsible for the death of thousands. But notably, America's hearts today are with the family of Kayla Mueller, her parents of which are here with us tonight in Salt Lake City. Today, 2 of the ISIS killers responsible for Kayla Mueller's murder were brought to justice in the United States. Jihadi John was killed on the battlefield along with the other Beetle. The reality is that when Joe Biden was vice president, we had an opportunity to save Kayla Mueller. It breaks my heart to reflect on it, but the military came into the Oval Office, presented a plan. They said they knew where Kayla was. Baghdadi had held her for 18 months, abused her mercilessly before they killed her. But when Joe Biden was vice president, they hesitated for a month. And when armed forces finally went in, it was clear she'd been moved 2 days earlier. And her family says with a heart that broke the heart of every American that if President Donald Trump had been president, they believe Kayla would be alive today.
Thank you, Vice President.
Look, we destroyed the ISIS caliphate. And you talk about re-entering the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, the last administration transferred $1.8 billion to the leading state sponsor of terrorism. President Donald Trump got us out of the deal.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
And when Qasem Soleimani was traveling to Baghdad to do harm to Americans, President Donald Trump took him out.
Vice President Pence.
And America is safer, our allies are safer, and the American people know President Donald Trump will never have
Vice President
take action.
I would like to give Senator Harris a chance to respond, but not at such great length, because, of course, there are other topics we want to talk about.
But I would like equal time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
First of all, to the Mueller family, I know about your daughter's case, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. What happened to her is awful, and it should have never happened. And I know Joe feels the same way. And I know that President Obama feels the same way. But you mentioned Soleimani. Let's start there. So after the strike on Soleimani, there was a counter strike on our troops in Iraq. And They suffered serious brain injuries, and do you know what Donald Trump dismissed them as? Headaches. And this is about a pattern of Donald Trump's, where he has referred to our men who are serving in our military as suckers and losers. Donald Trump, who went to Arlington Cemetery and stood above the graves of our fallen heroes and said, what's in it for them? Because, of course, you know, he only thinks about what's in it for him. Let's take what he said about John McCain, a great American hero. And Donald Trump says he doesn't deserve to be called a hero because he was a prisoner of war. And this is very important when you want to talk about who is the current commander-in-chief and what they care about and what they don't care about. Public reporting that Russia had bounties on the heads of American soldiers. And you know what a bounty is? It's somebody puts a price on your head and they will pay it if you are killed. And Donald Trump had talked at least 6 times to Vladimir Putin and never brought up the subject. Joe Biden would never do that. Joe Biden would, but Joe Biden would hold Russia to account for any threat to our nation's security or to our troops who are sacrificing their lives for the sake of our democracy and our safety.
Thank you, Senator Harris. This is such an important issue, but we have other important issues as well. And Susan, I want to make sure we have a chance
I really have
to talk
to respond
about
to that. Look, she has
15 seconds because
well, I got to have
trying
more
to
than
keep,
that. Look,
well, I'm sorry, Vice President, but you've had more time than she's had so far.
The slanders against President Donald Trump regarding men and women of our armed forces are absurd.
I'm sorry, Vice President
My son
Pence.
is a captain in the United States Marine Corps. My son-in-law is deployed in the United States Navy. I can assure all of you, with sons and daughters serving in our military, President Donald Trump not only respects but reveres all of those who serve in our armed forces, and any suggestion otherwise is ridiculous.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
The American people deserve, Susan, the American people deserve to know.
Vice President Pence, I did not, excuse me,
Susan,
I did not create the rules for tonight.
Joe Biden.
Your campaigns agreed to the rules for tonight's debate with the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm here to enforce them, which involves moving from one topic to another, giving roughly equal time to both of you, which is what I'm trying very hard to do.
Go right ahead.
So I want to go ahead and move to the next topic, which is an important one, as the last topic was, and that is the Supreme Court. On Monday, the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to open hearings on Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. Senator Harris, you'll be there as a member of the committee. Yes. Her confirmation would cement the court's conservative majority and make it likely open to more abortion restrictions, even to overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling. Access to abortion would then be up to the states. Vice President Pence, you're the former governor of Indiana. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want Indiana to do? Would you want your home state to ban all abortions? You have 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
Well, thank you for the question, but I'll use a little bit of my time to respond to that very important issue before. The American people deserve to know Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, was responsible for the death of hundreds of American service members. When the opportunity came, we saw him headed to Baghdad to kill more Americans. President Trump didn't hesitate, and Qasem Soleimani is gone. But you deserve to know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris actually criticized the decision to take out Qasem Soleimani. It's really inexplicable, but with regard to Joe Biden, it's explainable, because history records that Joe Biden actually opposed the raid against Osama bin Laden. It's absolutely essential that we have a commander-in-chief who will not hesitate to act to protect American lives and to protect American service members, and that's what you have in President Donald Trump. Now, with regard to the Supreme Court of the United States, let me say President Trump and I could not be more enthusiastic about the opportunity to see Judge Amy Coney Barrett become Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Now, she's a brilliant woman, and she will bring a lifetime of experience and a sizable American family to the Supreme Court of the United States. And our hope is, in the hearing next week, unlike Justice Kavanaugh received with treatment from you and others, we hope she gets a fair hearing And we particularly hope that we don't see the kind of attacks on her Christian faith that we saw before. I mean, the Democrat chairman of the Judiciary Committee before, when Judge Barrett was being confirmed for the Court of Appeals, expressed concern that the dogma of her faith lived loudly in her. Dick Durbin of Illinois said that it was a concern. Senator, I know one of our judicial nominees you actually attacked because they were a member of the Catholic Knights of Columbus, just because the Knights of Columbus holds pro-life views and
Thank you,
views.
Vice President Pence.
So
Your time
my hope is
up.
that when the hearing takes place, that
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
that Judge Amy Coney Barrett will be respected,
Thank you,
treated
Vice President
respectfully,
Pence.
voted and confirmed
Thank
to the
you.
Supreme Court of the United States.
Senator Harris, you're the senator from and former Attorney General of California. So let me ask you a parallel question to the one I posed to the Vice President. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want California to do? Would you want your home state to enact no restrictions on access to abortion? And you have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, Joe Biden and I are both people of faith, and it's insulting to suggest that we would knock anyone for their faith. And in fact, Joe, if elected, will be only the second practicing Catholic as President of the United States. On the issue of this nomination, Joe and I are very clear, as are the majority of the American people. We are 27 days before the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And, you know, before, when this conversation has come up, you know, it's been about election year or election time. We're literally in an election. Over 4 million people have voted. People are in the process of voting right now. And so Joe has been very clear, as the American people are. Let the American people fill that seat in the White House, and then we'll fill that seat on the United States Supreme Court. And to your point, Susan, the issues before us couldn't be more serious. There's the issue of choice, and I will always fight for a woman's right to make a decision about her own body. It should be her decision and not that of Donald Trump and the Vice President, Michael Pence. But let's also look at what else is before the court. It's the Affordable Care Act. Like, literally in the midst of a public health pandemic, when over 210,000 people have died and 7 million people probably have what will be in the future considered a pre-existing condition because you contracted the virus. Donald Trump is in court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And I said it before, and it bears repeating. This means that there will be no more protections if they win for people with pre-existing conditions. No. This means that over 20 million people will lose your coverage. It means that if you're under the age of 26, you can't stay on your parents' coverage anymore. And here's the thing. The contrast couldn't be more clear. They're trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Joe Biden is saying, let's expand coverage. Let's give you a choice of a public option or private coverage. Let's bring down premiums.
Thank you, Senator
Let's
Harris.
lower Medicare eligibility to 60.
Thank you, Senator.
That's true leadership.
You know, you mentioned earlier, Vice President Pence, that the president was committed to maintaining protections for people with pre-existing conditions. But you do have this court case that you are supporting, your administration supporting, that would strike down the Affordable Care Act. The president says, President Trump says that he's going to protect people with pre-existing conditions, but he has not explained how he would do that. And that was one of the toughest nuts to crack when they were passing the Affordable Care Act. So tell us specifically, how would your administration protect Americans with pre-existing conditions to have access to affordable insurance if the Affordable Care Act is struck down?
Well, thank you, Susan. But let me just say, addressing your very first question, I couldn't be more proud to serve as vice president to a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life. I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. And this is another one of those cases where there's such a dramatic contrast. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support taxpayer funding of abortion all the way up to the moment of birth, late-term abortion. They want to increase funding to Planned Parenthood of America. Now, for our part, I would never presume how Judge Amy Coney Barrett would rule on the Supreme Court of the United States, but we'll continue to stand strong for the right to life. When you speak about the Supreme Court, though, I think the American people really deserve an answer, Senator Harris. Are you and Joe Biden going to pack the court if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed? I mean, there have been 29 vacancies on the Supreme Court during presidential election years, from George Washington to Barack Obama. Presidents have nominated in all 29 cases. But your party is actually openly advocating adding seats to the Supreme Court, which has had 9 seats for 150 years, if you don't get your way. This is a classic case of if you can't win by the rules, you're going to change the rules. Now, you've refused to answer the question. Joe Biden has refused to answer the question. So I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more. In 1864...
Well, I'd like you to answer the question.
No, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Okay. In 1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly of the president, I assume of you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election, and it was 27 days before the election, and a seat became open on the United States Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate. But Honest Abe said it's not the right thing to do. The American people deserve to make the decision about who will be the next president of the United States, and then that person can select who will serve for a lifetime on the highest court of our land. And so Joe and I are very clear. The American people are voting right now, and it should be their decision about who will serve on this most important body for a lifetime.
Thank you, Senator Harris.
People, Susan, are voting right now. They'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court if you don't get your way in this nomination.
Let's talk about packing.
You once again gave a non-answer. Joe Biden gave a non-answer.
Trying to answer you now.
The American people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is they are going to pack the Supreme Court if they somehow win this election. Men and women, I got to tell you, people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to reject the Biden-Harris ticket. Come November the 3rd, re-elect President Donald Trump, and we'll stand by that separation of powers in a 9-seat Supreme Court.
Yeah, let's talk about packing the court then. Let's talk about the fact. Yeah, I'm about to. So the Trump-Pence administration has been, because I sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Susan, as you mentioned, and I've witnessed the appointments for lifetime appointments to the federal courts, district courts, courts of appeal. People who are purely ideological, people who have been reviewed by legal professional organizations and found to have been not competent, are substandard. And do you know that of the 50 people who President Trump appointed to the Court of Appeals for lifetime appointments, not one is black? This is what they've been doing. You want to talk about packing a court? Let's have that discussion.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Senator. Let's go on and talk about the issue of racial justice.
I just want the record to reflect she never answered the question. So I think the American people, maybe in the next debate, Joe Biden will answer the question, but I think the American people know the answer.
Thank you, Vice President. In March, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old emergency room technician in Louisville, was shot and killed after police officers executing a search warrant in a narcotics investigation broke into her apartment. The police said they identified themselves. Taylor's boyfriend said he didn't hear them do that. He used a gun registered to him to fire a shot, which wounded an officer. The officers then fired more than 20 rounds into the apartment. They say they were acting in self-defense. None of them have been indicted in connection with her death. Senator Harris, in the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes.
I don't believe so. And I've talked with Breonna's mother, Tamika Palmer, and her family deserves justice. She was a beautiful young woman. She had as her life goal to become a nurse, and she wanted to become an EMT to first learn what's going on out on the street so she could then become a nurse and save lives. And her life was taken unjustifiably and tragically and violently. And it brings me to, you know, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that America witnessed, during which An American man was tortured and killed under the knee of an armed, uniformed police officer. And people around our country of every race, of every age, of every gender, perfect strangers to each other, marched shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, fighting for us to finally achieve that ideal of equal justice under law. And I was a part of those peaceful protests. And I believe strongly that, first of all, we are never going to condone violence, but we always must fight for the values that we hold dear, including the fight to achieve our ideals. And that's why Joe Biden and I have said on this subject, look, and I'm a former career prosecutor. I know what I'm talking about. Bad cops are bad for good cops. We need reform of our policing in America and our criminal justice system, which is why Joe and I will immediately ban chokeholds and carotid holds. George Floyd would be alive today if we did that. We will require a national registry for police officers who break the law. We will, on the issue of criminal justice reform, get rid of private prisons and cash bail, and we will decriminalize marijuana, and we will expunge the records of those who have been convicted of marijuana. This is the time for leadership on a tragic, tragic issue of unarmed black people in America who have been killed.
Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me pose the same question to you. In the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Well, our heart breaks for the loss of any innocent American life. And the family of Breonna Taylor has our sympathies. But I trust our justice system, a grand jury that refused the evidence. And it really is remarkable that as a former prosecutor, you would assume that an impaneled grand jury looking at all the evidence got it wrong. But you're entitled to your opinion, Senator. I think, look, and with regard to George Floyd, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. And justice will be served. But there's also no excuse for the rioting and looting that followed. I mean, it really is astonishing. Flora Westbrook is with us here tonight in Salt Lake City. Just a few weeks ago, I stood at what used to be her salon. It was burned to the ground by rioters and looters. And Flora is still trying to put her life back together. And I must tell you, this presumption that you hear consistently from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that America is systemically racist, and that, as Joe Biden said, that he believes that law enforcement has an implicit bias against minorities, is a great insult to the men and women who serve in law enforcement. And I want everyone to know who puts on the uniform of law enforcement every day that President Trump and I stand with you. And it is remarkable that when Senator Tim Scott tried to pass a police reform bill, brought together a group of Republicans and Democrats, Senator Harris, you got up and walked out of the room. And then you filibustered Senator Tim Scott's bill on the Senate floor that would have provided new accountability, new resources. Look, we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement, improving public safety, and supporting our African-American neighbors and all of our minorities. Under President Trump's leadership, we'll always stand with law enforcement, and we'll do what we've done from day one, and that is improve the lives of African Americans. Thank you, Vice President. Record unemployment, record investments in education, and we'll fight for school choice for all of our minorities.
Thank you, Vice President. I'd like to respond.
Senator Harris.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President on what it means to enforce the laws of our country. I am the only one on this stage who has personally prosecuted everything from child sexual assault to homicide. I'm the only one on this stage who has prosecuted the big banks for taking advantage of America's homeowners. I'm the only one on this stage who prosecuted for-profit colleges for taking advantage of our veterans. And the reality of this is that we are talking about an election in 27 days, where last week the President of the United States took a debate stage in front of 70 million Americans and refused to condemn white supremacists.
Not true.
And
not true.
It wasn't like he didn't have a chance. He didn't do it, and then he doubled down. And then he said, when pressed, stand back, stand by. And this is a part of a pattern of Donald Trump's. He called Mexicans rapists and criminals. He instituted as his first act a Muslim ban. On the issue of Charlottesville, where people were peacefully protesting the need for racial justice, where a young woman was killed. And on the other side, there were neo-Nazis carrying tiki torches, shouting racial epithets, anti-Semitic slurs. And Donald Trump, when asked about it, said there were fine people on both sides. This is who we have as the president of the United States. And America, you deserve better. Joe Biden will be a president who brings our country together.
Senator Harris.
And recognizes the beauty in our diversity and the fact that we all have so much more in common than what separates us.
Vice President Pence, let me give you a minute to respond.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that very much. You know, I think this is one of the things that makes people dislike the media so much in this country, Susan, is that you selectively edit, just like Senator Harris did, comments that President Trump and I and others on our side of the aisle make. I mean, Senator Harris conveniently omitted, after the president made comments about people on either side of the debate over monuments, he condemned the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists, and has done so repeatedly. You're concerned that he doesn't condemn neo-Nazis. President Trump has Jewish grandchildren. His daughter and son-in-law are Jewish. This is a president who respects and cherishes all of the American people. But you talk about having personally prosecuted. I'm glad you brought up your record, Senator.
Thank you.
I really need to make this point. When you were DA in San Francisco, when you left office, African Americans were 19 times more likely to be prosecuted for minor drug offenses than whites and Hispanics. When you were Attorney General of California, you increased the disproportionate incarceration of blacks in California. You did nothing on criminal justice reform in California. You didn't lift a finger to pass the First Step Act on Capitol Hill. I mean, the reality is your record speaks for itself. President Trump and I have fought for criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Vice President
Pence. We fought for educational choice and opportunities for African Americans, all of our minorities.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll do it for 4 more
Thank you. You know, there is no more important issue than the final issue that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is the issue of the election itself.
Susan, he attacked my record. I would like an opportunity to respond.
Let me give you 30 seconds because we're running out of time.
I appreciate that. First of all, having served as the Attorney General of the state of California, the work that I did is a model of what our nation needs to do, and we will be able to do under a Joe Biden presidency. Our agenda includes what this administration has failed to do. It will be about not only instituting a ban on chokeholds and carotid holes.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Harris.
I would like to go through.
These are points that you made earlier in the hour, and I want to talk about the election itself before we have to.
But I want to talk about the connection between what Joe and I will do and my record, which includes I was the first statewide officer to institute a requirement that my agents would wear body cameras and keep them on full time. We were the first to initiate a requirement that there would be a training for law enforcement on implicit bias because, yes, Joe Biden and I recognize that implicit bias does exist, Mr. Vice President, contrary to what you may believe. We did the work of instituting reforms that were about investing in reentry. This is the work that we have done and the work we will do going forward. And again, I will not be lectured by the Vice President on our record of what we have done in terms of law enforcement and keeping our communities safe and a commitment to reforming the criminal justice system of America.
Thank you, Senator Harris. And I'd like to pose I'd like you to respond first to the question on our final topic, the election itself. President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If your ticket wins and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, What steps would you and Vice President Biden then take? What would happen next? You have 2 minutes.
So I'll tell you, Joe and I are, I think, particularly proud of the coalition that we've built around our campaign. We probably have one of the broadest coalitions of folks that you've ever seen in a presidential race. Of course, we have the support of Democrats, but also independents and Republicans. In fact, 7 members of President George W. Bush's cabinet are supporting our ticket. We have the support of Colin Powell, Cindy McCain, John Kasich, over 500 generals, retired generals, and former national security experts and advisors are supporting our campaign. And I believe they are doing that because they know that Joe Biden has a deep, deep-seated commitment to fight for our democracy and to fight for the integrity of our democracy and to bring integrity back to the White House. And so we believe in the American people. We believe in our democracy. And here's what I'd like to say to everybody. Vote. Please vote. Vote early. Come up with a plan to vote. Go to iwillvote.com. You can also go to joebiden.com. We have it within our power in these next 27 days to make the decision about what will be the course of our country for the next 4 years. And it is within our power, and if we use our vote and we use our voice, we will win. And we will not let anyone subvert our democracy with what Donald Trump has been doing, as he did on the debate stage last week, when again in front of 70 million people, he openly attempted to suppress the vote. Joe Biden, on the other hand, on that same debate stage, because clearly Donald Trump doesn't think he can run on a record because it's a failed record, Joe Biden on that stage said, hey, just please vote. So I'll repeat what Joe said. Please vote.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Pence, President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If Vice President Biden is declared the winner and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what would be your role and responsibility as vice president? What would you personally do? You have 2 minutes.
Well, Susan, first and foremost, I think we're going to win this election. Because while Joe Biden and Kamala Harris rattle off a long litany of the establishment in Washington, D.C., an establishment that Joe Biden's been a part of for 47 years, President Donald Trump has launched a movement of everyday Americans from every walk of life. And I have every confidence that those same Americans that delivered that historic victory in 2016, they see this president's record where we rebuild our military, we revived our economy through tax cuts and rolling back regulation, fighting for fair trade, unleashing American energy. We appointed conservatives to our federal courts at every level. And we stood with the men and women of law enforcement every single day. And I think that movement of Americans has only grown stronger in the last 4 years. But when you talk about accepting the outcome of the election, I must tell you, Senator, your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election. It's amazing. When Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, the FBI actually spied on President Trump and my campaign. I mean, there were documents released this week that the CIA actually made a referral to the FBI documenting that those allegations were coming from the Hillary Clinton campaign. And of course, we've all seen the avalanche, what you put the country through for the better part of 3 years until it was found that there was no obstruction, no collusion, case closed. And then, Senator Harris, you and your colleagues in the Congress tried to impeach the President of the United States over a phone call. And now Hillary Clinton has actually said to Joe Biden that in her words, under no circumstances should he concede the election. So let me just say, I think we're going to win this election. President Trump and I are fighting every day in courthouses to prevent Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from changing the rules and creating this universal mail-in voting that will create a massive opportunity for voter fraud. And we have a free and fair election. We know we're going to have confidence in it. And I believe in all my heart that President Donald Trump's going to be reelected for 4 more years.
You know, I've written all the questions that I've asked tonight, but for the final question of the debate, I'd like to read a question that someone else wrote. The Utah Debate Commission asked students in the state to write essays about what they would like to ask you. And I want to close tonight's debate with the question posed by Brecklin Brown. She's an 8th grader at Springville Junior High in Springville, Utah. And here's what she wrote, quote, "When I watch the news, all I see is arguing between Democrats and Republicans. When I watch the news, all I see is citizen fighting against citizen. When I watch the news, all I see are two candidates from opposing parties trying to tear each other down. If our leaders can't get along, how are the citizens supposed to get along?" And then she added, "Your examples could make all the difference to bring us together," end quote. So to each of you in turn, I'd like you to take 1 minute and respond to Brecklin. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute.
Brecklin, it's a wonderful question. And let me just commend you for taking an interest in public life. I started following the news when I was very young. And in America, we believe in a free and open exchange of debate. And we celebrate that. And it's how we've created literally the freest and most prosperous nation in the history of the world. But I would tell you that don't assume that what you're seeing on your local news networks is synonymous with the American people. You know, I look at the relationship between Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late justice who we just lost from the Supreme Court, and the late Justice Antonin Scalia. They were on polar opposites on the Supreme Court of the United States, one very liberal, one very conservative. But what's been learned since her passing was the two of them and their families were the very closest of friends. I mean, here in America, we can disagree. We can debate vigorously, as Senator Harris and I have on this stage tonight. But when the debate is over, we come together as Americans. And that's what people do in big cities and small towns all across this country. So I just want to encourage you, Brecklin. I want to tell you that we're going to work every day to have government as good as our people. And the American people each and every day love a good debate. We love a good argument. But we always come together and are always there for one another in times of need. And we've especially learned that through the difficulties of this year.
Senator Harris, what would you say to Brecklin?
First of all, I love hearing from our young leaders. And when I hear her words, when I hear your words, Brecklin, I know our future is bright because it is that perspective on who we are and who we should be. That is a sign of leadership and is something we should all aspire to be. And that, you know, that brings me to Joe. Joe Biden, one of the reasons that Joe decided to run for president is after Charlottesville, which we talked about earlier. It so troubled him and upset him like it did all of us, that there was that kind of hate and division. What propelled Joe to run for president was to see that over the course of the last 4 years, what Brecklin described has been happening. Joe has a long-standing reputation of working across the aisle and working in a bipartisan way. And that's what he's going to do as president. Joe Biden has a history of lifting people up and fighting for their dignity. I mean, you have to know Joe's story to know that Joe has known pain, he has known suffering, and he has known love. And so, Brecklin, when you think about the future, I do believe the future is bright. And it will be because of your leadership, and it will be because we fight for each person's voice through their vote, and we get engaged in this election because you have the ability through your work and through eventually your vote to determine the future of our country and what its leadership looks like.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We want to thank also the University of Utah for its hospitality, and most of all, our thanks to all the Americans who watched this debate tonight. Again, our best wishes for a quick recovery to President Trump, the First Lady, and everyone who is battling COVID-19. The second presidential debate is next week on October 15th, a town hall-style debate in Miami. We hope you'll join us then. Good evening.
And that is the end of the vice presidential debate right there. What a difference a week makes. two very different personalities on the stage tonight. They showed their personalities throughout the debate, both by what they said and didn't say, how they reacted when their opponent was talking. Both candidates likely more effective in attacking their opponents than defending the records of their principles. Some informed questions from the moderator, Susan Page, but the candidates often ignored her when they were answering the question, didn't answer those questions at all. Kamala Harris scoring on the coronavirus, healthcare, and Russia. Mike Pence trying to steer things back to the economy and taxes. And David Muir, you're here. You.
All right. Let me turn this off over here. All right. Well, another debate is over. Thanks to everyone that tuned in for the whole time. I just want to go over a few key points that I thought stood out from what we just saw. So, on Kamala Harris's side, well, I guess overall the debate, it was more amicable than the last one, that's for sure. So the last one was definitely fraught with just, I guess, child antics and just the inability to hear two people try to have a discussion. So this was I guess a breath of fresh air, for lack of a better term. But some of the key points that I noticed were it felt like Kamala Harris just came for a fight. It felt like she was just ready just to spring into action, and she was kind of she seemed a little on edge the entire time. Well, for sure in the beginning. Pence seemed like really collected throughout the whole thing. I just think by nature he's just a very kind of it seems like he has the emotional state of a rock. And so I guess it's kind of hard to get a rise out of him or just any form of emotional outburst. But there was a few times when he did get a little slighted, and you can see it in his facial expressions and his body language. She, on the other hand, seemed like, I understand where she was coming from. I think a lot of people share her sentiment of just being tired of hearing these dudes just spew bullshit. So I think that was the vibe she was emitting, and for the people that feel that way, they're probably going to appreciate that coming from her. So a few key points. I know Kamala Harris had mentioned that they were going to offer the vaccine for free. I think I heard that correctly. Her and Joe Biden want to, when the vaccine comes out, offer it for free. Then she was asked if a vaccine comes out that is not under their administration, or just in general, would she take it? She said if Fauci says yes. First she was saying if the experts say yes, but then she name dropped Fauci, which I think is going to be pretty important moving forward, because it kind of like we've had this public debate about Fauci over and over, and he has become this figure. And I think when you just look at government in a broader viewfinder, you really understand how important trustworthy figures are in government, right? Or in public policy and directing and leading the public at large. So, Fauci may be the barometer of what the actual, how do I say this? A lot of people are very distrusting of any vaccine that's going to come out in the next few months or even year, right? So, something like her here saying Fauci is the barometer of what is a valid vaccine, right? So it's yet to be seen. She also spoke about Trump's taxes. So I myself refrain from not so much passing judgment. I mean, knowing what I know about rich people in America, just around the world, but specifically America, rich people don't pay taxes. And, to be completely honest, most people are looking for a way to lessen their tax burden. I think that's just human nature, right? The reality, though, the difference is really wealthy people can pay other people who know the tax code to lessen their tax burden, right? Whereas normal people like you and me, I pay someone and they lessens my tax burden a little bit, but I don't make as much to the degree to lessen it by much, if that makes sense. I'm mostly paying for tax preparation as opposed to lessening my tax burden, where wealthy people, they pay to lessen their tax burden. And you know, you and I, we paid just to get it done for us. That's different. So the story when it came out, the story that they're referring to, New York Times, I believe, said that Trump paid $750 in taxes, right? And that he owed upwards of like $420 million in debt to, you know, to a lender yet to be named, or lenders yet to be named, unless more of the documents come out. So I think that's important because, you know, they go on to further talk about the Trump tax cuts, but I think that that's important to us, or it should be important, because the reality is that if rich people aren't paying the taxes, the people that have the most money in this country, or the corporations who make the most money and that operate in this country, or that benefit from the labor of us who live in the country, if these people and these entities are not paying taxes, then that only leaves us to pay taxes. And we don't make enough to pay for all of this on our own. And I think that's just the short answer, right? So her bringing up that story, and the reason why I was saying is the story is yet to be, how do I say this, like independently verified as far as I know. I know it was published by the New York Times, so it's a reputable source. But again, we live in an age where, how about this? I prefer to have things properly vetted before I say, yeah, this is legit. So until we actually see the documents, the tax returns that they say that they acquired, you know, we don't know for sure, but we can infer. And I think my inference is that while the figure of 750 and the figure of 430 some odd million owed, while those figures may not be exact, I think the idea that that's what they found is totally plausible. Biden-Harris ticket looks like it's going to have free public tuition now. Something that I know that a lot of people gave Bernie Sanders a lot of flack about, just a lot of his policies. More that will show up in the Biden-Harris tax plan, which I just want to be noted as evident that the blue team's a lot more progressive than they allowed anyone in the media to tell us, and more than they wanted to admit, the leaders of the blue team, to us. So I'll leave it as that. They also said they wanted to, this was a new thing that came out, I think it was earlier today or a couple days ago. Joe Biden said that now we're going to get $10,000, and I say we because I also have student debt. So anyone, I don't know what the stipulations are, but the plan that's going out is $10,000 of student debt relief. So again, I don't know what the stipulations are on that, but I think the average American has, I think it was $36,000 of student debt, something to that effect. So another thing that she talked about was their tax plan, not raising taxes on anyone that makes less than $400,000. Yes. So, you know, obviously it's like you can't, everything's so nuanced, but the media and sometimes our public discussions don't allow for nuance. So if a candidate goes out and says, I'm going to raise taxes, you know, and then they go on to further explain who they're raising taxes on and why they're raising taxes, all that gets pulled out is the part where the person says, I'm going to raise taxes. So it's hard for them to really get out why and who and what. But she explicitly said, no one that makes less than $400,000 will get taxed at an increased rate. They also said as the police reform was like a big part where she laid out a couple different facets of that position. She talked about for police reform for banning chokeholds. And like the cardioid holds, something like that. It's where you cut blood flow off, right? Blood and oxygen. A national registry of police officers that have done criminal acts. I think I heard that's what I heard. They were going to end cash bail, which if you haven't looked into the cash bail system in the United States, it's absurd. They were going to legalize marijuana, and I think she said expunge the records of low-level offenders of marijuana offenses. And one of my big things that I've always that's been in my radar and actually wrote papers about when I was in school was about the use of private prisons. So she said at the federal level, at least, that they would end the use of private prisons for federal usage. And that's a big deal. That's a really big industry. And a lot of big money donors, they don't just donate to the Republican side, but they are heavy red, but they donate to all candidates. We're talking about GEO Group and CCA. They give to keep these prisons private so that they can profit off of incarceration. So moving on to Pence, there really wasn't much to note, to be completely honest. He did a lot of platitudes. He talked a lot about how much they support families and the troops and stuff like that. So and then it seemed, and this is me trying to call ball and strikes, it just seems like he was trying to rewrite history, like as if we don't know exactly what has happened or what is exactly happening now. He was like talking almost as if he lived in a fantasy land, and it was a little bit tough to, because so he tried to, one of the things that I heard him say very, very early on that I thought was really interesting was how he said Trump shut down the economy to take care of coronavirus. And so the reality is that our economy is not in a really good place right now, right? And the economy traditionally is a deciding factor on who people vote for, especially undecided voters. If the economy is doing really well, people are like, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? Leave this person in place. So the rhetoric used to describe the current state and the previous state of the economy is really important here. So he's trying to change the narrative to say that Trump shut down the economy, which, and in that he was saying how he saved us because the travel ban from China, and and then he kept going back to the Trump tax cuts. And one of the things that I think was really, like, I just find it really not disingenuous, because it's the reality, right? But it's almost like a slap in the face to you and me, like how thankful we should be. So the Trump tax cuts, most people saw a little jump in their paycheck. That was real. You did. You got taxed less, like almost, imagine like when how do I explain this? You got taxed a little bit less in the beginning, but you were eventually going to pay for it in the end anyways. But so what he was saying was the average American got a $2,000 a year tax cut. Yay, $2,000. What can we do with $2,000? Small things, but nothing that has a really lasting effect on our future. With something like a $15,000 tax cut, now maybe a family has extra income to save for buying their first home. $2,000, that's like nothing, So to come out and say, oh, well, you all should be so grateful. We did this for you. We gave you $2,000 back in your pocket, while millionaires and billionaires and large corporations, Amazon being one of them, effectively pay 0% in a federal tax every year, like we all do, in the form of an income tax and other taxes that we pay periodically throughout the year. Yeah, I think that's kind of bullshit. So he kept trying to champion the Trump tax cuts. And then the last thing that was of note that he was talking about was he said the Green New Deal would crush jobs. So I don't know about you all, but every time I've looked at innovation and like new ages in the world, like industrial age and kind of stuff like that, yes, there was a loss of jobs. But usually it was a loss of jobs that was far outweighed by the creation of new jobs, new innovative jobs, right? So yeah, I'll say the thing that no one wants to say. Yes, coal jobs eventually go away in a future energy efficient world. That's just the way it is. I mean, we don't have steamboats anymore. We don't have like steam engine trains anymore, right? Like, no one right now is like, yo, bring back steam jobs, So why can't we, in an orderly manner, phase out fossil fuel usage now and other forms of energy that destroy the environment? Again, I know that a lot of these places in the United States were built like they're coal towns, I mean, that's where governments, local governments, with the help of federal governments, have to get really creative in how they help those communities transition to a new form of making a living for themselves. It's not like we just take the jobs from these places and, you know, that's some capitalism shit, right? And that's what they'll sell you all day about how this all runs. So what I would like is a hybrid form, which is, yes, free market capitalism, all that good stuff, but there's still these social safety nets, right? So when you talk about a universal basic income, something that Dr. King talked about, and then Andrew Yang most recently in his campaign, where, you know, you give Americans a universal income that allows them to sustain some form of life and longevity, you know, like being able to pay their bills and stuff, while exploring new endeavors. So imagine a world, imagine a United States where you take someone's, how do I say it? Where someone's coal job has been effectively eradicated by new technology, but the new technology that's replacing it is being handled by those same people that used to do the coal jobs, and they were able to get the training because they were being paid while they were doing their retraining in the form of like a universal income. So there was a cushion for them to explore what part of the new energy sector that they wanted to be a part of, or just to go do whatever else they want to do. Why does everyone from a coal town have to work in coal? So, and that's just how I think about that. So, yeah, those were a few points from the debate that I saw. Thank you all for tuning in. And as always, on the DA perspective, I may not always be correct, but at least I started the conversation. Peace.